Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. What is his name? What shall I tell them? I am who I am. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, and the truth, and the life. I am the true vine. I am the founder of one. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Before Abraham was born, I am.
Let this be a lesson to all you ants. Ideas are very dangerous things.
You are mindless, soil-shoving losers, put on this earth to serve us.
You're wrong, Hopper. Ants are not meant to serve grasshoppers. I've seen these ants do great things. And year after year, they somehow manage to pick food for themselves and you. So who is the weaker species? Ants don't serve grasshoppers. It's you who need us. We're a lot stronger than you say we are. And you know it, don't you?
And remember, kids, the next time that somebody tells you the government wouldn't do that, oh yes they would.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. What is his name? What shall I tell them? I am who I am. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way. And the truth and the life. I am the true vine. I am the founder of one. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Before Abraham was born, I am.
Let this be a lesson to all you ants. Ideas are very dangerous things.
You are mindless, soil-shoving losers. Put on this earth to serve us.
You're wrong, Hopper. Ants are not meant to serve grasshoppers. I've seen these ants do great things. And year after year, they somehow manage to pick food for themselves and you. So who is the weaker species? Ants don't serve grasshoppers. It's you who need us. We're a lot stronger than you say we are. And you know it, don't you?
And remember, kids, the next time that somebody tells you the government wouldn't do that, oh yes they would.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. What is his name? What shall I tell them? I am who I am. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, and the truth, and the life. I am the true vine. I am the founder of one. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Before Abraham was born, I am.
Let this be a lesson to all you ants. Ideas are very dangerous things.
You are mindless, soil-shopping losers! Put on this earth to serve us!
You're wrong, Hopper. Ants are not meant to serve grasshoppers. I've seen these ants do great things. And year after year, they somehow manage to pick food for themselves and you. So who is the weaker species? Ants don't serve grasshoppers. It's you who need us. We're a lot stronger than you say we are. And you know it, don't you?
And remember, kids, the next time that somebody tells you the government wouldn't do that, oh yes they would.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. What is his name? What shall I tell them? I am who I am. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, and the truth, and the life. I am the true vine. I am the founder of one. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life. And I will raise them up at the last day. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Before Abraham was born, I am.
Let this be a lesson to all you ants. Ideas are very dangerous things.
You are mindless, soil-shoving losers. Put on this earth to serve us.
You're wrong, Hopper. Ants are not meant to serve grasshoppers. I've seen these ants do great things. And year after year, they somehow manage to pick food for themselves and you. So who is the weaker species? Ants don't serve grasshoppers. It's you who need us. We're a lot stronger than you say we are. And you know it, don't you?
And remember, kids, the next time that somebody tells you the government wouldn't do that, oh yes they would.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. What is his name? What shall I tell them? I am who I am. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way. And the truth and the life. I am the true vine. I am the founder of one. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Before Abraham was born, I am.
Let this be a lesson to all you ants. Ideas are very dangerous things.
You are mindless, soil-shoving losers. put on this earth to serve us.
You're wrong, Hopper. Ants are not meant to serve grasshoppers. I've seen these ants do great things. And year after year, they somehow manage to pick food for themselves and you. So who is the weaker species? Ants don't serve grasshoppers. It's you who need us. We're a lot stronger than you say we are. And you know it, don't you?
And remember, kids, the next time that somebody tells you the government wouldn't do that, oh yes they would.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
Check, check. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, guys, welcome back. Today we have quite a few videos planned. It's kind of just a hodgepodge. We've been going on some serious world news recently, and these are just some videos that I think everybody should see. Some are old, some are new. But yeah, I think we'll all learn something new tonight. So I want to start out with this video. How Jewish American PDF files hide from justice in Israel. And this is from 5 years ago from CBS News. Well, it's always something. Properties. Window capture. Safari. All right, we got it. I just gotta double check this. Let's see. Oh, that's weird. See that video is shorter, and dimensions are different. Anyways. All right. How Jewish American PDF files hide from justice in Israel 5 years ago by CBS News.
Poll that allows accused and convicted American pedophiles to escape justice by moving to Israel. So Ian Lee has been following this for more than a year, and he traveled to Israel for this investigation. He worked with a group that tracks people accused of sex crimes, which estimates dozens of Americans have used this loophole.
So, you know, he's 6'2".
We are on a stakeout looking for this man, Jimmy Julius Caro, 48 years old and wanted on charges of sexually assaulting a 9-year-old girl in Oregon back in 2000 and a 5-year-old girl in Israel in 2001. He's considered dangerous. But these photos are a few years old, so we don't know if he'll look the same. He remains elusive. Previous attempts to capture him have failed.
Obviously, the fear that he would somehow figure out that anyone's looking for him and bolt. He just called his number.
Shauna Aronson got a tip that Caro's expected at this clinic near Tel Aviv.
Who's going to call the
She's with JCW.
How long it takes a beginner like my dad to go from beer belly to get ripped.
Jewish Community Watch, an organization that hunts down accused pedophiles who flee to Israel from the U.S., exploiting a process called Law of Return, whereby any Jewish person can move to Israel and automatically gain citizenship. The ease with which pedophiles seem able to use this law as an escape route haunts victims like Mendy Hawk.
Real quick, so this is CBS, so everybody should know it's true. But just in case you don't, map of sex offenders in Israel. So everybody's seen those sex offender maps. You know, they show the dots. This is what it looks like. So that is registered sex offenders in Israel. Look how stacked it is, you know. So that's what we're dealing with here.
Says he was abused from age 8 by a teacher at an Orthodox Jewish school in Los Angeles.
So your classroom is right here. How does it feel being back?
I was very anxious and, you know, stressed coming back here, and a lot of memories coming through my mind.
Memories of his alleged abuser, Mordechai Yom Tov, who taught him Hebrew studies when he was just 8 years old.
So in the beginning, he would just rub me like outside of my pants, and then I would say about 3 to 4 months later, he started going like in.
Reaching down your pants?
Yeah, it's reaching down.
Why did you feel like you couldn't tell anyone?
I was scared, I was ashamed. I mean, I just didn't know what people would think of me, of the whole situation.
Yom Tov pled guilty in 2002 to sexually abusing and committing lewd acts against 3 other boys. He served jail time, but when he was released...
Look into his eyes. Do you see any regret or really anything? It looks like someone who feels like he's justified, in my opinion. But, you know, make your own opinion. But that's kind of what it looks like to me. When you look into his eyes, I don't see any guilt or remorse. I see, yeah, I did it, so what? And let's see, he served 1 year, released on probation. You guys see that? Served 1 year, released on probation. For, what did he exactly? Lewd acts with 3 boys? (2002) pled guilty to sexually abusing and committing lewd acts against 3 boys and
committing lewd acts against 3 other boys. He served jail time, but when he was released...
served 1 year and released on probation. Guys, do we think that that is a... I know you guys can't answer. We're working on the chat. It'll be fixed before next stream. But just, do you think that serving 1 year for sexual abuse and lewd acts with 3 different children is good? Is that acceptable for our justice system?
violated his probation, and according to JCW, fled to Israel with help from individuals within the Orthodox Jewish community. JCW tracked Yom Tov down and confronted him with a hidden camera in Jerusalem, where he admitted to illegally fleeing the United States with help and using a fake passport to enter Israel.
I was supposed to stay for 5 years in the same city. I was supposed to, let's see, join the Army Summer Crusader. I was supposed to go every 2 weeks to the police station. On parole. I left within a week later.
He had this message for his victims.
I'm very, very sorry.
The other person in this video is Meir Seawald, the founder of Jewish Community Watch. He tells CBS News Yom Tov's case isn't uncommon in the Orthodox community.
The same thing that's going on in the Catholic Church right now around the world, the exact same thing happens in our community. The rabbis say it's, you know what, he promised he's going to go for therapy, he's never going to do it again. Boom, he's in another community. A few years later, he's at the same thing, and we hear more allegations that the person continued to abuse children.
And often, those abusers...
So are they really sorry if they keep doing it?
...end up in Israel. Rabbi Yehuda Oppenheimer says he unwittingly...
Oppenheimer? Is Oppenheimer a Jewish name? German and Ashkenazic Jewish surname. And J. Robert Oppenheimer, the guy who made the nuclear bomb, was Jewish. The more you know. Was Oppenheimer religiously Jewish? He was not religious. He was secular, non-observant German-Jewish household, emphasizing ethics over creed, though he was aware of and sometimes self-conscious about his Jewish heritage, particularly in opposition to rising anti-Semitism. He famously claimed the J in his name stood for nothing and distanced himself from traditional Judaism, even as the outside world perceived him as Jewish. Interesting. Great movie, though. Great movie.
Caro escape. There was nothing that raised any red flags up to the point where he was moving to Israel.
Well, I wish I could say that, but unfortunately I can't say that. So he had violated his parole, and now they were looking for him. He said that there was something in the past that had happened when he was young, but nothing had ever happened since. I've changed and I'm a different person now, and but you gotta help me. I felt that I could trust.
Is that the victim or the abuser?
So I wrote him a letter, and he bought a ticket, and he left.
Do you want to take a second to touch on something that I think is really important? I'm a huge advocate for mental health on this page. You guys already know, especially...
Caro is accused of abusing more children when he got to Israel. What was that like for you when you found that out?
Punch to the gut. It was very painful.
Rabbi Oppenheimer says the reason he came forward is to shine a light on the process of accused pedophiles fleeing, to help ensure it doesn't happen again. Back at the stakeout,
so
an ambulance pulls up and a man steps out. It's Caro.
So that's him. Real quick, look into those eyes, guys. Look into those eyes. Sorry, I'm trying to... I don't think I can do it. Yeah, he's guilty. He's guilty. Where we're right about here. So yeah, this is him.
Back at the stakeout, an ambulance pulls up and a man steps out. It's Caro.
That was definitely him. Oh my God. Okay.
The police are called and eventually arrive. His days on the run are over as he's led away.
Did you assault the girl in the United States? No. Did you flee Israel because you assaulted the girl in the United States? Have you ever assaulted any girls in Israel? Do you know that you're wanted by Interpol?
Yeah.
There's relief as police escort him to their car. This marks the end to a months-long manhunt.
Oh my gosh! Can I give you a hug? I have something I need to tell you. Yeah. Okay. We found him, and he was just arrested. What? He was just arrested.
Wow, oh my gosh.
Amuna, not her real name, is the person on the other end of the line. She was a little girl when Caro entered her life.
I was 4 or 5 years old. My mother was on bed rest. My father's a rabbi, so he wasn't really home. He used to come to our house. We used to play games, and then it became sexual. I'm going to give you a cookie because you do it so nicely. It's all about the cookie. It's all about lying, and it's all about being so evil to a little child. He also threatened me. He would kill my parents. He would choke me. He would hold me. He would kidnap me.
How did that affect you?
A lot. Yeah. It affected my whole life. My whole life is around this sexual abuse and rape. Yeah.
Amuna turned to therapy and art to help deal with the trauma.
This is in my bedroom and my inspiration.
She paints and writes poetry, but she's still angry that it was allowed to happen in the first place.
What are your thoughts on him being able to come to Israel and flee the United States?
It brings up a lot of anger and a lot of frustration towards the Israeli system.
Shauna says the failure begins in the U.S.
Why would someone want to help one of these pedophiles escape?
Oftentimes there's some sort of community incentive. Either somebody owes them a favor, or someone in the community, let's say an institution, has covered up for them in the past, and they know that if this goes to court, there's a lot of civil liability coming down the line, you know, and it's going to cost a lot of money to a lot of people, and nobody wants to deal with that.
Shauna accuses the Israeli police of not prioritizing accused pedophiles on the run.
Why do you have to be the...
He kind of looks like Adam Sandler. Kind of.
To do this?
Because nobody else is. I don't have any better answer than that.
And if you guys weren't doing it?
Then nobody would do it.
Israeli police told CBS News that, quote, the police coordinate closely with the Ministry of Justice and worldwide police organizations in order to find suspects overseas. Today, Caro faces charges in Israel, while back in the United States, the district attorney's office in Clackamas County in Oregon told CBS News they are working with federal authorities to secure his extradition. But Mordechai Yomtov remains at large. The district attorney here in Los Angeles told us they have not requested Yomtov's extradition and that they had no other comment. Jewish Community Watch says that is the problem. If American officials don't try to get accused pedophiles from Israel, then they simply escape justice and leave children at risk. The U.S.
They're blaming it all on the states, but I think it's also Israel's, you are harboring PDF files, so I don't think it all falls on the states. I think, they're in Israel, so prosecute them in Israel.
Of Justice declined to comment on specific cases, but praised their relationship with Israel's law enforcement, adding sex offenders have been successfully extradited in the past. Days after Caro's arrest, Amuna confronted him at an Israeli police station.
I was scared. It was good. It was good to confront him. It was important for me to have that closure in my life.
The healing process will continue for Amuna, but for many, like Mendy, the lack of justice means the pain continues.
So there are two things JCW says could help close this pathway. First, better background checks on people moving to Israel. And second, more willingness from U.S. authorities to...
Well, yeah, obviously better background checks. It gets to a point where you're like, maybe it's happening on purpose. We all saw that the map. It's just stacks on stacks of sex offenders. And, it comes to a point where you start to think, like, maybe this is not accidental.
The accused.
So it certainly seems like law enforcement, both here and in Israel, are sort of busy patting themselves on the back on how well they cooperate with one another. But Jewish Community Watch seems to be doing most of that grunt work, that on-the-ground investigating. Why do they say, the group, why do they say more pedophiles aren't being apprehended?
So it's very complicated when you leave the United States and go to Israel. First, they say that once these people are wanted, that they need to go to Interpol and have that international arrest warrant put out for them so that the Israeli authorities can then start looking for them. Extradition is expensive, and a lot of these jurisdictions just don't have the money or manpower to really pursue them. And then when you get to the Israeli side, JCW says that they need to be doing more background checks on these people. Sometimes a simple Google search will bring up, especially if it's an Interpol arrest warrant, will bring that up, and so that they can then know this person is dangerous, they should not be let in, or if there is an arrest warrant out for them, that they need to go and pick them up. And JCW says that there just isn't the priority to go and pick these people up, that the police don't have the resources there to go and look for these people as well. So it really does fall on JCW to track them from the United States to Israel.
That's unbelievable. Does JCW also sort of believe that aside from law enforcement, there are sort of other elements of the community that need to work on this?
Yeah, and that's another big part of this, is that a lot of the times these people have help. And help within the community, people that help them flee to Israel. Sometimes, as we saw with Yom Tov, he had help, according to JCW, to flee the country through Mexico and then get a passport, a fake passport there to immigrate to Israel. So these
are elaborate schemes.
They are, and they need a lot of people to pull off. And they say that there needs to be a conversation within the community about not protecting people. And that's where what's so important to have Rabbi Oppenheimer, come forward and talk about this and say, this.
Well, they're talking about what can be done. And I think the first thing that can be done is stricter punishment. I mean, that guy had 1 year in jail and then probation for sexual abuse of 3 different boys. But that's unacceptable in my opinion. And that's the United States. That's the United States' rules. And, this is just common, like, across the board. We're very lenient on sex offenders, and I don't know why. I think it's, like, one of the worst crimes you can commit. So we should be talking, like, same punishment as murder, or at least, like, manslaughter. Like, 10 to 15 years minimum, I would say. That's my opinion, but I think that would solve a lot of these issues, And if you have a problem, I mean, if it's a common theme that these people are getting on probation and then fleeing to Israel, don't let them get on probation, The law should be much stricter. You should be in jail for a long time for doing stuff like that. That is really messed up.
Is something that is happening, and we need to address this. And and he said, the one important thing is, if someone comes to you, don't be so trusting. Look into their background, especially if there's someone who wants to immigrate very quickly. Take some time to make sure this isn't a person who's trying to flee justice.
Yeah, he was a really good element to your story because sometimes, it's not everyone's bad. There are good people just trying to help out, and they find themselves sort of caught up in a bad situation.
Exactly.
Hey, Ian, it's really nice having you here, too. Thank you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so that was 5 years ago. So that's what's going on with that. CBS News, it doesn't get any, I don't want to say it doesn't get realer than that, but, the only people who think CBS is fake news is Trump, and MAGA. I wouldn't be surprised if this video came out and got popular again, and then, had an ad play while I was trying to talk to you guys. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. There's something I want to show you guys. Hold on. On that same note, there's something else I want to show you guys. Pred catch. Oh, wow. So Chris Hansen caught a rabbi too, but this isn't what I was talking about.
What about this guy?
Confronting Rabbi Pred. I saw this video a couple months ago. Well, screw it. We can look at Chris Hansen. That's a classic.
I am Chris Hansen with Dateline NBC, and we're doing a story on computer predators.
Hold on, guys. Hold on. Here we go. All right. So, a rabbi, a religious leader, right? Let's check it out.
I am Chris Hansen with Dateline NBC, and we're doing a story on computer predators.
Oh, no. Come on, guy.
You don't want to touch anybody. Predator Raw. We rent a house. Our people wire it with hidden cameras and microphones. Volunteers from the online watchdog group Perverted Justice act as decoys, go into chat rooms with a profile that includes a picture that's unmistakably underage, and they sit and wait. And the next thing you know, the guy is knocking on our door, trying to have a sexual liaison with a 12, 13, or 14-year-old boy or girl. What's great about going back to the raw tapes is we can look at things that give us a better
This is old Chris Hansen, too.
idea of how these guys' minds work. Why does a 56-year-old man on his lunch hour walk into a house where he thinks a 13-year-old boy is home alone? How do you get there? I mean, this guy sent photos of himself performing oral sex on another man to somebody he thought was 13. And like so many of the other men who ultimately visited us in Fairfax County, Virginia, this guy was a prominent member of society.
Okay.
I gotta ask, you still gonna be up for tonight after seeing your girlfriend?
We'll see.
The level of comfort we see by watching these guys before I have my interaction says to me they're either very comfortable taking part in this activity, or they've done it before, or they've spent so much time chatting online with someone they think is a teen that they don't believe there's any danger at all. Now, earlier in the chat, he had talked about going out to dinner with his girlfriend and then perhaps coming over to meet the boy after that. And just as he finishes that ha ha ha, he turns around and I walk into the room. And you see this physical reaction on his part. And he knows that his life is about to change. So how can I help you?
Uh-oh.
Go ahead, have a seat.
Look at him licking his lips. Oh, shit. I'm fucked. Oh, shit.
I
I'm
suggest
fucked.
you sit down. And take your hands out of your pockets, please. What are you doing here?
Oh, shit.
That's good.
Why don't you tell me what your plan was?
I don't want to be. This isn't good.
Oh, really?
Not good.
This isn't good.
That's kind of an understatement, isn't it?
Can I know who you are, please?
I want to know a little bit more about why you were here first.
Chris Hansen, motherfucker.
Can I say some identification?
Now, I don't want to lie to him, but I don't want to let him know I'm Chris Hansen with Dateline NBC just yet. Well, I'm happy to tell you who I am, but I also want to go over some of this chat log with you. It appears from this that you were setting up a meeting with a 13-year-old boy. Okay, you're only 13. Yep, 13. For a 13-year-old, you handle yourself pretty well. Yes, you are very cute, and when boys are that cute, they usually look like their moms. So you pretty much thought you were coming here to meet a 13-year-old boy named Conrad.
The transcript of an email.
Do you have anything to say for yourself? I like sucking and being sucked. I like to kiss. And now I'm getting ready to ask him what he does for a living. I already know, but I want to hear it from him. What do you do for a living?
A rabbi.
A rabbi.
Rabbi.
Now, presumably, you counsel families and children in your position as a rabbi?
Yeah, I like to suck and fuck. I like to suck and fuck when little boys, they look like their mothers. What the fuck is wrong with you, dude? Look at his posture, too. Posture check. Posture check. I'm a rabbi. Yeah, you wouldn't catch me dead admitting that. That's crazy. I mean, thanks for the honesty, but what the fuck, dude? Do they not think about...
Children. What are you doing as a man of God, as a rabbi, in this house?
Well, hold on, man of God, let's... You know what?
Trying to meet a 13-year-old boy.
I'm really... I don't want to do anything that's going to further make you angry.
I'm not angry.
You're coming across in a very angry...
No, he's not coming across as angry as all. He's coming across as someone who just caught you trying to meet a 13-year-old for sex, and maybe, you know, I bet if you got him in a room alone, you'd force him too. This is, and see how he immediately starts playing the victim, like, I don't want to say anything that's going to make you more angry. And he was talking very just, you know, and this is old too, so like, this is something that has happened a lot and continues to happen.
In authoritative sense, I've asked you for identifications to who you are, and you've yet to show it to me. Right now, all that's happened is that I'm sitting in a house.
And you sent pornographic pictures through the mail. Okay, that's a federal offense right there.
You know I'm in trouble, and I know I'm in trouble. I am not interested in getting any further in trouble. This is not something that I've done.
You've never done this before. You know, because I hear that a lot.
Run that back.
Getting any further in trouble. This is not something that I've done.
You've never done this before.
This is not something that I've done.
Not something that I've done.
You've never done this before.
Get him, Chris.
You know, because I hear that a lot. You see a reaction on his face. And that pretty much seals the deal. He wants to know right then and there who I am. And so I tell him.
I don't understand why I can't have some identification.
I'm more than happy to tell you who I am. I am Chris Hansen with Dateline NBC, and we're doing a story on computer predators.
Oh, no. Come on.
Oh.
You don't want to touch anybody. You don't want to.
What are you going to do, big boy?
It was really one of the only times, really, where somebody actually physically lunged at me. Now, looking back, I really don't think I was in much danger. But you can see how the security system works. Our guy stepped in, took care of it, and diffused the situation.
You've got to stop this.
Sit down. Sit down.
You don't have any
You're free to leave any time.
You've got to stop this. You've got to stop this. I'm getting better, but it writes itself.
Took care of it and diffused the situation.
You've got to stop this.
Got to stop this.
Sit down.
You don't have any
You're
right.
free to.
You don't have any right. Free to leave at any time. He's out.
We got phone calls from him for months, and he was downright mean. He blamed us for his situation, and we offered him the chance to do an interview. He initially said yes, but only if we didn't show the video from the house, didn't show his face, or identify what he did for a living. And obviously, those were conditions we could not meet. In this investigation, unlike the more recent ones, we did not have police doing a parallel investigation. These guys walked away. We did, however, interviewed the Fairfax County, Virginia police afterwards, and perverted justice supplied police with the chat logs. So ultimately, a lot of these guys were prosecuted.
Remember Rabbi David Kay?
We'll see.
Despite his actions caught on hidden camera and his graphic internet exchange, Rabbi Kay called us several times, claiming he did nothing wrong. However, earlier this week, he resigned his staff position, informing his employer he was going to be featured in this Dateline story. He also had no comment about this picture Dateline found while investigating the rabbi's background. It shows Kay in a group photo, including 2 other rabbis caught and convicted of soliciting a child for sex on the internet.
Do you ever think to yourself, I can't believe how many of these people are out there?
It's overwhelming at times.
In the end, most experts agree it's really up to parents to keep children safe from online predators.
Update, November 2nd, 2005. Rabbi David Kay, a.k.a. Red BD, resigned from his position as an official with an educational program for Jewish high school students as a direct result.
All right, I'm going to read this. I don't like his voice. November 2nd, 2005. Rabbi David Kay, a.k.a. Red BD, resigned from his position as an official with an educational program for Jewish high school students as a direct result of this chat log and the Dateline Group media bust. Thankfully, he will no longer be working alongside high school-age children for the immediate future. Hopefully, after being featured on Page and Dateline, he will never be able to work with children again. Update, September 6, 2006. Rabbi David A.K. was convicted of both counts against him. He is currently incarcerated awaiting sentencing in federal prison. He faces up to 60 years in prison. And then December 1st, 2006, he was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. 6.5 years in prison is better than the other video we saw. But here's why I think. So, let me look it up real quick before I say anything that's wrong. But what is the penalty for sexual abuse of a minor in America? I feel like that should give me an AI answer really easily, but mandatory minimum penalties for federal sex offenses. Okay, well, this is... Oh, hold on. I don't know why it can't just give me a direct answer. Like, look, what is the penalty for murder? Federally. Life imprisonment to the death penalty. Right? So it's very clear. Now, for sexual abuse of a minor. Why can't it give me a direct answer? You guys seeing? Here it is. Okay, federally. Imprisonment for a term of years to life imprisonment. So the law, although it was hard to find, the law does seem to be pretty, okay, aggravated sexual abuse using force, threat of force, or rendering unconscious, up to life imprisonment. No minimum. Well, that's weird. No minimums. I don't like the no minimum. Sexual abuse up to life. Sexual abuse of a minor. Age difference of 4+ years. Victim 12 to 16 years old. Up to 15 years in prison. Sexual exploitation of children. Mandatory minimum of 15 up to 30. Distribution receipt of child CP. Mandatory minimum of 5 years up to 20. And possession of CP is up to 10 years in prison. So, I disagree with the CP. I think those should be stricter. But Are you guys seeing this? So like sexual abuse, threatening victim incapable of consent appraisal, up to life imprisonment. And then the exact same thing except of a minor is up to 15 years in prison. So now correct me if I'm wrong, but if you sexually abuse a woman that's an adult, you know, it's up to life. But if you do it to a child, then it's only up to 15 years. Is that right? So, okay, either way, the laws are weird, right? But let's go back to that one guy, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So he was facing up to 60 years, and he only got 6.5. So, and those cases happen a lot. So now we're looking at judges. Why is the judge so lenient on this guy? Because he had a good lawyer, or what? I don't think there should be any leniency. You know what I mean? The mandatory minimums need to be up there. Like, that should have been mandatory minimum 15 years. You know what I mean? But hey, what do I know? But yeah, I find that weird how, you know, the penalty was 60 years and he only got 6.5, right?
Of this chat log and the Dateline Group media bust. Thankfully, he will never be convicted of both counts against him. He is currently incarcerated awaiting sentencing. The other two men pictured in the photo with David K. were also convicted.
Okay. Rabbi Gerald Levy pleaded guilty in August, 2 counts of soliciting sex through the internet and 2 counts of CP. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison. That seems light. Rabbi Israel Kestenbaum, New Jersey, and then the other guy was Florida, sentenced to 5 years of probation and counseling in a cyber proposition case. He pleaded guilty to trying to arrange a sexual tryst over the internet with a police officer posing as a 13-year-old girl named Katie. The judge explained that he did not sentence Kestenbaum to jail because the rabbi's wife has cancer. So what? My wife has cancer. Please don't send me to jail for this. I promise I won't do it again. Dude.
And the details are as follows. Rabbi Gerald Levi of Boca Raton, Florida, pleaded guilty in August 2001. Pleaded with a rabbi's wife, expelled Kestenbaum for violating ethics rules.
Okay, so that's that. I couldn't find the one, but it was on Instagram. I saw it a long time ago. But yeah, that's that. And obviously, you know, not all Jewish people are PDF files, but it is a disproportionate amount, and it's weird. And it also, you know, they're counted as white in a lot of statistics, so they're giving white people a bad rep. I'm not gonna lie. Either way, it's something that's been happening for a long time. I mean, OG Chris Hansen pulled it, you know, and it happens to this day. I'm pretty sure Gideon found one too. So look into that. But either way, yeah, that's that. We're gonna move on. We are gonna move on to Epstein and Trump real quick. There's just a couple little updates I want to hit you guys with. All right, recording. All right. We're going to move on to Epstein and Trump. There's a couple little updates here. So first of all, key witnesses or new witnesses subpoenaed in Epstein files case. Now, if you're anything like me, we need to figure out what the hell subpoena means. Subpoena definition. So it's a summon, right? So ordering a person to attend a court. So that's good. Yeah, so key witnesses are getting sent to court to like testify and stuff. So that's great. So yeah, let's see what's up with this.
Since the Justice Department missed the deadline to release all of the files related to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation, as required by law, not a suggestion, by law. This week, the two House members who led the push to unseal those documents, Republican Thomas Massie and Democrat Ro Khanna, asked a federal judge to step in and appoint a special master to ensure all the documents are released. The request comes.
Ro Khanna, he was in that the video Tommy G did about foreign influence in U.S. politics. So yeah, now that I know the name, I'm hearing it more. That's cool. These fucking guys.
After the DOJ revealed earlier in the week that it had only publicly posted about 12,000 documents, but still have more than 2 million to review, meaning they have released less than 1% of the file so far. I don't know if you're good at math. That's basically nothing. And all the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee are demanding the Republican Oversight Chairman James Comer hold a hearing and force Attorney General Pam Bondi to testify about the DOJ's actions or inactions in releasing the Epstein files. Quote, the department's actions and public statements relating to the Epstein files have been conspicuously inconsistent, evasive, deficient, and misleading, heightening suspicions that DOJ is covering up details of...
Oops. The department's actions and public statements relating to the Epstein files have been conspicuously inconsistent, evasive, deficient, and misleading, heightening suspicions that the Department of Justice is covering up details of Epstein's crimes in fealty. What does fealty mean? Fealty. Definition. A feudal tenant, formal acknowledge of loyalty to a lord. Huh. So how does that fit there? Fealty to the white. Oh, so Department of Justice is submitting themselves to the Trump, basically, I guess. Okay. I bet Thomas Massie wrote this.
Epstein's crimes and fealty to the White House. Joining us now is the top Democrat on that committee, House Oversight Committee, Congressman Robert Garcia. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us on set this morning. You know, there's the question of the special master, but there's also the question, I've talked to some legal experts on this, that you guys, the Congress could just sue the administration, right? You could take the DOJ to court and say to a judge, they are breaking the law. Make them follow the law. And instead of a special master, which, you know, seems unlikely, but have like an actual lawsuit. Why, would Republicans be on board with that? And why hasn't that happened yet?
So it hasn't happened yet because we'd actually have to have a majority of the House on board for the lawsuit. And so a lawsuit from the House actually has to be first really pushed by the majority or a majority of members. And so we would need support from Republicans to actually get that lawsuit.
Well, all of them but one signed.
Right. Still, that was an action they were forced to do. And so the legal action from the House is absolutely on the table, but so is legal action from outside groups. So there are a bunch of groups right now that are looking at the best way of approaching this. Getting a federal judge involved, which Congressman Connor from, of course, our committee is doing, is a good step and approach. And we've been planning kind of what this rollout on the legal front has been for a while. Right now, the fact that 99% of the Epstein files have not been released to the public from the DOJ is crazy. Yeah. Especially when you think about what's already been, of course, released. I mean, there's been some significant information that's come out to the public. And so this is incredible. I mean, the American public should be just pissed that the DOJ is defying the will of not just Congress, but of the public. The public wants the files released.
Yeah.
And you did have, though, a small victory this week, and along with the Oversight Committee, in succeeding to issue more subpoenas. That obviously requires the cooperation of James Comer, who has to sign off on those subpoenas. They're going to go to the longtime friend and client of Jeffrey Epstein, Les Wexner. He's the former CEO of Victoria's Secret, and Epstein managed his personal finances. There is some really excellent reporting about how inextricably entwined their fortunes were. I'm wondering what you hope to get from that, and also if you can make a little news here, who else you're planning on subpoenaing. I mean, there's a host of other names. Alan Dershowitz. There's Jean.
That name, Les Wexner and Alan Dershowitz, pretty sure I heard something about him just recently. Yeah, Les Wexner. Les Wexner was a part of study group. Here, let's pull it up. it is. Okay. So, study group. The mega group was an informal group of influential Jewish entrepreneurs. It was founded in 1991 by Les Wexner and Charles Bronfman, and it just said that Epstein managed Les Wexner's finances, right? The group met twice yearly for philanthropy and Judaism seminars. It is said to have had up to 50 members, including Hollywood director Steven Spielberg. Wexner led the group with Bronfman, and it inspired several philanthropic initiatives such as the Partnership for Excellence in Jewish Education, Birthright Israel, and support for the renewal of Hillel International. Pro-Israel lobby group. Tried to influence U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. So basically AIPAC, same type of group. 2003, it employed Republican political consultant Frank Luntz to help the group mobilize support for Israel. Under the name MEGA, the group is also said to have had contacts with the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad, and to have, which is basically the CIA, if you guys didn't know, and to have served as a vehicle for influence operations in the United States. Jeffrey Epstein is said to have used the group to build up his network of high-ranking contacts in business, media, and politics. Wexner was Epstein's primary financial supporter. So Wexner was giving Epstein a bunch of money, yet later claimed to have known nothing of his criminal activities. Just something to know, guys. Something to know.
Luke Brunel, there's a number of former personal assistants.
There's Donald Trump.
I imagine
Bill
that
Clinton.
lower profile names might be amenable to Comer signing on to subpoenas for them as well.
Absolutely. Look, we have a long list of subpoenas, a long list of folks that we want to actually, of course, talk to.
Who are the next people on those lists?
Yeah, well, let me first get to Les Wexner. This is really important. So Les Wexner is critical. I mean, this is a billionaire
Wait,
benefactor.
so Les Wexner is who they subpoenaed to court? I figured it would be like a victim or something that would actually, like, you know. You think Les Wexner apparently had no idea. He's not going to say anything unless is he being tried?
A few people were involved with the finances more than him. And
yeah, no, it says witnesses. Les Wexner literally said he doesn't know anything. We just read that. So this is the subpoena that they're so happy about?
Of course, led Victoria's Secret, was very involved, essentially paid for much of Epstein's fortune. And we also did a subpoena in that same exact meeting with both Epstein's former lawyer and accountant, the two heads of the Epstein estate. So those three individuals, the reason we subpoenaed them is because the survivors have mentioned their names to us more than any other names. In fact, after the Wexner subpoena vote, I got multiple messages from survivors saying thank you. And remember, Wexner was listed as someone that actually, by Virginia Giuffre, where abuse was happening at his home, and another of the survivors actually mentioned that he actually also did the abuse. And so, look, we want to find out what happened there. As far as people in the future,
did prosecutors ever identify him as a co-conspirator?
Okay, then maybe I spoke too soon.
So that is one of the problems, is we don't know because we don't have the access to the files. And we don't know who made the decision to not go after either whether it's Mr. Wexner or other folks. As far as folks in the future, I want Jeffrey Epstein's pilot in front of the committee. I want Jeffrey Epstein's assistants in front of the committee. And so there's a lot of folks that we are pushing. We have been pushing Comer, particularly on Wexner and both Daniel and Richard, who are the two heads of the Epstein estate. We've been pushing to get those names. We finally got them, quite frankly, because Representative Luna on the other side worked with me. We cut a deal. We moved it forward, and we got some Republicans to vote with us.
On this issue of holding DOJ accountable for not following the law, here's Thomas Massey, Congressman Massey, on Tuesday, where he claims that Trump officials could face criminal prosecution over the Epstein files. Watch this.
Typically, like with contempt, you might refer that to the DOJ, and then the DOJ never prosecutes itself.
And we watched this yesterday. We get the point. There's another thing about Trump that I want you guys to see. So while all this stuff is going on, so there is some breakthrough with the Epstein case. You know, we're getting key witnesses to testify, and at the same time, we're, invading Venezuela. And on top of that, threatening to invade Iran, threatening to invade Mexico. So this is the David Pakman Show. Let's see what he has to say.
The Trump administration is unlikely to stop with Venezuela. Trump and the people around him seem to be quickly spiraling into the next invasion. Marco Rubio was asked on Meet the Press, what about Cuba? Is Cuba a problem? And Marco Rubio, kind of read between the lines here, although you don't have to do much reading between the lines. Yeah, Cuba. That could be next.
Is the Cuban government the Trump administration's next target, Mr. Secretary? Very quickly.
Well, the Cuban government is a huge problem. Yeah, the Cuban government is a huge problem. First of all,
is that a yes?
Cuba, but I don't think people fully appreciate. I think they're in a lot of trouble. Yes, I'm not going to talk to you about what our future steps are going to be and our policies are going to be right now in this regard, but I don't think it's any mystery that we are not big fans of the Cuban regime, who, by the way, are the ones that were propping up Maduro. His entire, internal security force, his internal security apparatus is entirely controlled by Cubans. One of the untold stories here is how, in essence, you talk about colonization, because I think you said Dulce Rodriguez mentioned that. The ones who have sort of colonized, at least inside the regime, are Cubans. It was Cubans that guarded Maduro.
All right. So, yes, Cuba is in a lot of trouble, and we may go there next. And Marco Rubio, during the press conference over the weekend with Donald Trump announcing what took place with Maduro, also talking about Cuba. Hilariously, he describes Cuba in a way that makes it sound like the United States.
A disaster. It's run by incompetent, senile men, and in some cases, not senile, but incompetent nonetheless. They have...
Really is sounding quite a bit like the United States, I have to tell you. Aside from it sounding like he's describing Donald Trump, they're making it pretty clear what the plan is. And Lindsey Graham, just hours ago on Air Force One, saying, Cuba, you'd better watch out.
Could have done it. And as to this commander-in-chief, he did something people talked about doing. You just wait for Cuba. Cuba is a communist dictatorship that's killed priests and nuns. They've preyed on their own people. Their days are numbered. We're going to wake up one day, I hope in 26, in our backyard, we're going to have allies in these countries doing business with America, not narco-terrorist dictators killing Americans. This is a big frigging day. And everybody in the world is thinking differently than they were just a few days ago because of what you did.
They're thinking Trump is genuinely nuts. This goes back to a foreign policy idea. There is a camp that believes the most valuable trait when it comes to foreign policy is a president that no one can predict, and that makes others be careful, keeps people in line, this sort of thing. But there's another side to that coin, which is a president that nobody can predict means a president we don't trust to do anything with. And as we've seen, Donald Trump just backs out of deals he doesn't like or says, I don't care if we're in NATO, we're not coming to the defense of this, that, or the other country. And so what they believe is a feature actually is a bug to the detriment of the United States. But they're making it clear. I mean, you got to hand it to Rubio and Lindsey. They want Cuba. Maybe they want Colombia as well. Now, on the bonus show today, we will talk about, after all the oil talk, what's going on with oil prices. Might surprise you. There is a shift in Republican strategy pointing towards 2028, where maybe Don Jr. is being thought of as the heir apparent to Trump rather than J.D. Vance. We will discuss that. And finally, it appears as though Tim Walz is going to be dropping out of the gubernatorial race in Minnesota after the fraud pseudo-scandal, and Senator Amy Klobuchar.
That's old news, bro. That's old news. Real quick before we end this one.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
Donald Trump says something, and this is, I guess, from a couple of weeks ago.
He's talking about housing, because right now it's absolutely...
Well, yeah, he's just trying to say whatever he can. Freaking, it's all a distraction from the Epstein files. So, yeah, let's move on. Okay. All right, guys. So that's pretty much our news for the day. Oh, real quick. Yeah, let's check this out. Real quick. U.S. strikes ISIS in Syria. This is Fox News, but let's see what this is about.
as Army Apache helicopter gunship.
More now on that breaking news. The United States has launched an attack in Syria. Let's check in with Lucas Tomlinson. He's traveling with the president in West Palm Beach right now. Lucas.
Good afternoon, John. Officials say this is payback for the killing of those 2 Iowa National Guard soldiers and their American interpreter last month in Syria. If you recall, there was a first wave of airstrikes against the Islamic State in Syria on December 19th. That night, F-15E Strike Eagles were used, A-10 Warhawks, as well as Army Apache helicopter.
That must have just slipped through because there was... I don't know if you guys heard that. That was funny, though. God, I totally lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah, so I guess it slipped through the cracks. December 19th, apparently. There, we bombed Syria already, and now we did it again.
Gunships. We await confirmation on what was used this time, but it's safe to say, John, those assets remain in the region. There's always a squadron of F-15 Strike Eagles. The last time the strikes were launched from Jordan, remains to be seen if the Jordanians assisted this time. But it all comes as the United States is working closer with Syria's government to root out and destroy the remnants of ISIS. And that December 19th strike, there were 70 targets. We'll have to see the readout of the strikes that are taking place right now, we're told. Those bombs have been dropped, and some of those aircraft are returning to base, John. We have not heard from President Trump today. It's notable, though, John, the schedule for President Trump is pretty light. He had a dentist appointment this morning. He did not go to his golf club to stick a tee in the ground. So
are we for real right now, Fox
monitoring...
News? This is supposed to be about U.S. striking ISIS in Syria, and we're talking about Trump's daily routine. Are we for real right now?
Been dropped, and some of those aircraft are returning to base, John. We have not heard from President Trump today. It's notable, though, John, the schedule for President Trump is pretty light. He had a dentist appointment this morning. He did not go to his golf club to stick a tee in the ground, so perhaps he is monitoring the situation as we speak in Syria, John.
What about those December 19th strikes? Do we know the assessment, the after-battle assessment of what happened there?
Nothing was published, John, but the U.S. Central Command responsible for all American forces in the Middle East said 70 targets were struck throughout central Syria. If you recall, after the killing of the 2 Iowa National Guard soldiers, that was during a key leader engagement in Palmyra in central Syria by what CENTCOM called a lone ISIS gunman was responsible. He had been serving in the Syrian security forces. He was delinquent, we were told. He was suspected of having ties for ISIS and was in the process of getting kicked out of the Syrian military. And President Trump has been working with Syria's new president, trying to strengthen ties in the region to kick ISIS out, also to bring Syrian Kurdish forces together with the Syrian forces in Syria. But this strike today, I'm told, is a continuation, the payback, the vengeance, if you will, John, after the killing of those 2 Iowa National Guard soldiers and their American interpreter.
And when Hafez al-Assad was still running Syria, the Russians had a significant presence there. And I know U.S. airstrikes had to be somewhat wary of not getting too close to the Russian zone of it.
Yeah, you guys get the idea. We're striking in the Middle East for virtually no reason, just because we can, I guess. And, you know, kind of the Iraq war kind of screwed that over for us, because now it's just a normal thing. Now we're just able to bomb whenever we like, and it's not even war. He's tripped up when he called it battle, because it's not really battle. You're just blowing shit up. And, you know, retaliation for the American interpreter dead or whatever, yeah, but December 19th. So I guess if that happened after we bombed on December 19th, then them killing the American interpreter and the 2 National Guard was probably in Iran or whatever, was probably retaliation for December 19th. So yeah, whatever. That's what's happening instead of releasing the Epstein files. All right, guys. We are gonna move on. Oops. So yeah, that's pretty much all of our news for today. We've been hitting the news pretty hard. It seems like it's kind of taking a break, and people are really riding it out, you know. Tell you what. let's watch. So this is a video from a year ago, and it's basically the history of the Israeli Defense Force, also known as the IDF, how it was formed. It's my first time seeing it. I do know a bit of the history, but it's my first time seeing this video, so let's see if I can learn something new, and let's all just see what's up with this.
The Israeli Defense Force, Israel's well-funded and high-tech army, is the most moral army in the world. That is, if you believe the branding.
צה"ל הוא הצבא המוסרי ביותר בעולם.
The most moral army in the world.
The IDF is a moral army.
The most moral. The IDF does more to safeguard the rights of civilians than any other army in the history of warfare.
But apart from the allegations of war crimes in Gaza, the attempts to paint it as an animal-friendly, queer-friendly, religiously tolerant military institution, the history of the IDF says more about it than its social media image. Before the formation of the State of Israel in 1948, and before there was an Israeli army, there were three underground Zionist militias: the Haganah, the Irgun, and the Lehi. They were comprised of mainly Jewish migrants to the British Mandate of Palestine, with the aim of helping usher in the Jewish state by any means necessary. They differed in their tactics and beliefs, and at times fought with each other, but together they terrorized Palestinian villages, committed acts of violence, terrorism, and ethnic cleansing, and executed bombings and assassinations against the British to force them to give up control of the land. They blew up hotels in Jerusalem, embassies in Europe, and assassinated a UN mediator. All of this happened before 1948, because after Israel was officiated as a state, these three groups would be brought together to create the IDF, and their militia leaders would go on to form Israel's government, become politicians, ambassadors, and prime ministers. And their dark history would be forgotten. So, let's talk about it.
I am the director of research at Harvard, and if I were to die tomorrow, I would want everyone with macular degeneration.
Let's begin at the turn of the 20th century. Europe was embroiled in revolution, war, and great social upheaval. Anti-Semitism had been rife for centuries in Europe, but attacks against Jewish communities had become widespread, particularly in Russia. While most attempted to flee to the United States, around 30,000 Russian Jews migrated to Palestine from 1882 to 1904, then under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. These communities were known as the New Yeshuv, and they built small self-reliant settlements independent of the old Yeshuv, who consisted mostly of Arab Jews who'd migrated to Jerusalem over centuries, mostly for religious practice. Unlike the old Yeshuv, the new Yeshuv were driven by a new ideology that was growing popular among European Jews as well as some influential Christian figures: Zionism.
And the basis of Zionism was the belief that the Jewish question, as it was called in Europe, in other words, the place of Jews, given the rising anti-Semitism, could only be solved territorially, that is, by establishing a state of their own. And from very early on, that state had to be in Palestine, because that way you could use religious legitimacy to justify what was settler colonialism.
The new Yeshuv were ambitious. They built farms, formed trade unions and councils to purchase land from Palestinians. They also began to form small militias, seeking to replace hired Arab watchmen with Jewish guards to protect the new outposts. Some of these militias, like Bar Giora, had bigger plans. Its members wanted to create the beginnings of an underground army, one that would one day serve a future Jewish state, and fight for one if need be. One of its founders was a young Polish laborer called David Grun, who migrated to Palestine in 1906. He was shocked at how many Palestinian Arabs worked in the new settler colonies as farmers and guards, and set about trying to build connections between migrants and fundraise to ensure the Yeshuv would become completely self-reliant. This included more money to buy weapons. Like many other Jewish migrants, he later adopted a Hebrew last name and would hence be known as David Ben-Gurion.
Ben-Gurion. So yeah, wow, that's crazy. So that's the guy that resigned as soon as JFK sent him the letter, basically talking about, hey, we need to see your nuclear weapons and stuff like that. Yeah, and this is a common theme. You'll see Well, first of all, Netanyahu's from Poland. You know, Ben Gurion, I guess, was from Poland too. Eastern European, you know, they changed their last names to sound more Jewish, you know, instead of European.
Back to him. By 1909, militias like Bar Giora began to evolve into larger networks, the most prominent being Hashimer, or the Watchmen. Despite only having a few dozen members, Hashimer began to think of itself as guarding not only the colonies and properties set up by the new Yeshuv, but as a vigilante force that would respond to disputes. If a Jewish person was attacked by a Palestinian, Hashimer would send its armed members to seek revenge. They were inspired by Ukrainian Cossacks and, interestingly, Palestinian Bedouins. They rode on horseback and even dressed in kufiyas. Weird, right? In his book Orientalism and the Hebrew Imagination, historian Yaron Peleg says the young Zionists wanted to recreate the image of the Jewish man and reject the anti-Semitic tropes of Jews as weak and passive. In the new Yeshuv, they focused on farming and fighting as ways to build stronger, more self-reliant men, what Zionist leader Max Nordau described as muscular Judaism. And while they drew inspiration from the agricultural Arabs they saw around them, they no longer wanted to rely on Palestinian laborers and guards in their settlements. The Jewish state of the future had to rely on a Jewish workforce, and eventually a Jewish army. At this point, the total Jewish population,
which is totally fair, you know, they are allowed to do that, you know, like that's totally fair. So I guess at this point, there's no terrorism happening, you know, that it's totally reasonable thing to do, to want to have your own laborers and your own guard, your own army, whatever. So let's just see where it goes from here, though.
Of Palestine was around 60,000 and accounted for only about 7% of the population, with many of the earlier Russian migrants going back home once the situation had eased. But by the end of
So in, what was that, 1917, 60,000, 7% of the population in Palestine. Now, let's look up population of Israelis in Palestine. Or demographics of Israel. Let's see this. This is monitored by Israel. Population. So let's see. Okay, the Israel Central Bureau of Statistics defines the population of Israel as including Jews living in all of the West Bank and Palestinians in East Jerusalem, but excluding Palestinians anywhere in the rest of the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and foreign workers anywhere in Israel. Okay, so 73.2%, about 7.2 million people are Jews, and 21% are Israeli citizens classified as Arab, some identifying as Palestinian. So yeah, so they used to be 7%, and now they are 70%. So that is, you know, what, you know, just something to think about. Let's get back to it.
With many of the earlier Russian migrants going back home once the situation had eased. But by the end of World War I, everything had changed. The Ottoman Empire collapsed, and Palestine was taken over by the British Army. Lord Arthur Balfour, himself a Christian Zionist and Foreign Secretary, signed the Balfour Declaration, promising to create a Jewish state in mandatory Palestine. This led to a bigger wave of migration to the new Yeshuv, and up to 100,000 Jewish migrants arrived from Eastern Europe in the decade following the war.
Hello, my name is Adam Ferrari, the Chief Executive Officer of Phoenix Energy. I look forward to
By now, the local Palestinian Arab population were starting to feel like something was amiss. Were outraged at the Balfour Declaration, and many of them saw it as a European plot to
colonize Palestine. Just so we all are aware, the Balfour Declaration Balfour Declaration. So it was written by Arthur Balfour, presented to the Rothschild, who own all the money. So, Balfour Declaration was a public statement issued by the British government in 1917 during the First World War, announcing its support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, then an Ottoman region. So the Ottomans were Arab Muslims with a small minority Jewish population. The declaration was so imagine you're a Palestinian in 1917, right? You allow these people onto your land. You allow immigrants onto your land. And then within 20 years, all of a sudden, there's a declaration by the most powerful people of the time, Britain and Rothschilds, the most powerful people on earth, that Palestine is the new homeland of the Jews, right? So that's kind of like you gotta see it from their perspective, Very interesting.
Arab land. House purchases in Jerusalem and Hebron were increasing, as were the construction of Jewish kibbutzes and settlements. But what pushed tensions to the brink was the increased religious activity around the Western Wall and Al-Aqsa compound, which some radical voices were arguing should be under total Jewish control. This spilled over into riots and general strikes targeting British and Jewish outposts, which escalated into communal fighting in 1920 and 1921. For the Zionist leaders, it proved that the local paramilitary groups needed to be better organized and better equipped to protect the new Yishuv. This led to the establishment of the Haganah, or the defense, which formed from the Hashemer recruits, as well as an influx of soldiers who had served in Jewish regiments in the British Army during World War I. They smuggled in more advanced weapons from abroad, and by the 1930s, the majority of Jewish settlers were enlisted, and the paramilitary group became the foundation of the new Yishuv. The Haganah now resembled what the Bar Giora had once dreamt up, an underground army fighting for the promise of a Jewish state. Initially, they coordinated and at times fought alongside the British against Palestinian Arab rioters in small skirmishes. The worst of these happened in 1929, when a rumor spread to Hebron that 2 Palestinians had been killed in the holy city of Jerusalem, and that a plot was underway to take Al-Aqsa. A riot ensued, targeting Jewish homes and synagogues. There were only 700 Jews in Hebron at the time, and many were sheltered by Palestinian families until the fighting ended, but by that time at least 50 Jewish settlers had been killed. The militants began to feel that the small British military presence was reluctant to fight the Palestinians, and resentment began to grow within their ranks. Some still looked to the British for protection, but others saw them as merely an obstacle to statehood that needed to move out of the way by force if necessary. Remember David Ben-Gurion? He'd now become the de facto leader of the new Yishuv as the president of the Jewish Agency, working with the British to protect Jewish interests and to shut down calls for unity with Palestinians. But Ben-Gurion didn't want to confront the Arabs head-on, not at this stage at least. He also didn't want to create problems with his British allies and instituted a policy of havlaga, restraint. Under his watch, the Haganah forces would only be deployed to protect Jewish settlements, not launch offenses against Palestinian villages. At least, not for another few years. In a letter he would later write to his son in 1937, Ben-Gurion made his intentions pretty clear. Quote, "We must expel the Arabs and take their places. And, if we have to use force, not to dispossess the Arabs of the Negev and the Transjordan, but to guarantee our own right to settle in those places, then we have force at our disposal." Right to settle in those places, then we have force at our disposal.
So, that's a direct quote from the first leader of Israel. We must expel the Arabs and take their places. And this is before they had a majority. There were people on that land before they got there, right? Similar to Native Americans, Not necessarily, though, because we very quickly Actually, no. I don't know. No, yeah, we used to be the minority, and we, took them out. It's the same thing here.
Ben-Gurion's focus was back on Europe, where the tides of anti-Semitism were rising to unprecedented levels. With the emergence of Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich, it became clear that more efforts were needed to transfer as many Jews to Palestine as possible. Over the next decade, 250,000 European Jews would flee to Palestine, pushing existing tensions to a boiling point. The divisions within the Haganah were growing as well, between those who followed Ben-Gurion's lead and another group of revisionist Zionists, who not only felt that the British were getting in the way of the dream of creating a greater Israel over the whole of the Mandate of Palestine, but who also believed that this greater Israel should extend to all of Jordan and parts of Lebanon and Syria. But to make this dream a reality, they needed to put an end to Palestinian resistance on their own terms, without waiting for orders from the British or even Ben-Gurion, whose policy of restraint failed to convince the most hardline young Zionists. So they took matters into their own hands, splintering from the Haganah and formed their own paramilitary group, the Irgun. The Irgun was led by a number of defected Haganah senior commanders, including, most significantly, the writer Ze'ev Jabotinsky. Jabotinsky was the founder of revisionist Zionism and had been active in Jewish defense efforts in the Russian Federation before going on to found one of the Jewish regiments in the British Army with the aim of fighting against the Ottomans in Palestine. In a paper he published in 1923 entitled The Iron Wall, Jabotinsky outlined his fundamental disagreements with Ben-Gurion and the other moderate Zionists, who he called vegetarians and peacemongers. Quote, "Our peacemongers are trying to persuade us that the Arabs are either fools whom we can deceive by masking our real aims, or that they are corrupt and can be bribed to abandon to us their claim to priority in Palestine. We may tell them whatever we like about the innocence of our aims, watering them down and sweetening them with honeyed words to make them more palatable, but they know what we want." Jabotinsky believed that all native populations resist colonists, and that the only way to deal with them was by creating an iron wall of force that couldn't be penetrated. With his ideas, the new militia began to grow from dozens to thousands, with an emblem that represented their ambitions to expand to all of historic Palestine as well as Transjordan. They initially fought strategically alongside the Haganah and the British, but that would change in 1936, when a Palestinian uprising would push them to take matters into their own hands.
A few years ago, Tony Robbins helped Serena Williams break through a mental slump and return to championship.
Unrest in Palestine. Suspecting that the Higher Committee had incited Arab leaders to start a holy war against the British government, police swooped on the secret headquarters of assassins and rebels. Many arrests were made.
It was called the Great Revolt. Furious at Britain's support for Zionism, the growing population of armed settlers, and the crippling economic impacts of the Great Depression, the Palestinians attempted to overthrow British occupation, and with it, end the attempts of dividing their land. It began with a series of general strikes from mostly farmers, but soon the rebellion began to take structure, with armed rebels forming platoons and appointing leaders. But they were up against two British regiments, making up around 20,000 soldiers, as well as an armed and trained Jewish guard force and Haganah and Irgun forces that together made up tens of thousands of armed militiamen. In short, they were outnumbered and certainly outgunned. The uprising lasted for 3 years, ultimately failed, with British forces, the Haganah and Irgun, often fighting alongside each other to crush the Arab revolt, killing thousands and razing entire villages. Irgun militants planted explosives and landmines in public.
And this is before the formation of Israel. So we went over the list of war crimes that Israel has committed since 1948. It's a long list of massacres, killing, surrendering people, unarmed civilians, women and children. And, you know, it's happened before 1948 too, right? So, yeah.
Places and engaged in shootouts with Arab guards. Seeing the situation spiraling out of its control, and with another war brewing in Europe, Britain passed the White Paper in 1939, which implemented for the first time strict limits on Jewish migration, allowing for only 75,000 new migrants over 5 years. This was the final straw for Jabotinsky and the revisionists. They saw it as a betrayal, proof that the best way to protect Jewish interests in Palestine was to go on the offensive, and that their biggest threat wasn't the Palestinians, it was the British, who they now regarded as an occupying force that needed to be expelled. By this time, Jabotinsky himself had been exiled back to Europe by the...
So, with the Balfour Declaration, the British were helping them occupy the land, settle the land. And then they betrayed the British, right? And this is a common theme you'll see with Zionists. You know, they're your friend as long as you're useful to them. And then...
who were concerned about his growing influence. There he began to formulate a plan, recruiting and training small underground cells in Poland that would first help evacuate as many as 1.5 million European Jews and sneak them and himself into Palestine illegally, bypassing the White Paper's restrictions. Together with one of the Irgun's leaders back in Palestine, a Polish Zionist named Avraham Stern, they recruited 40,000 Jewish militants and began smuggling handguns, rifles, explosives, and ammunition with the intention of launching their own revolt against the British. Stern even penned an anthem for the Irgun called Unknown Soldiers, a song that called on Jews to join the underground militias and die for their cause. But the outbreak of World War II would put the Irgun's plans of a great Jewish revolt on hold. Seeing the rise of Hitler and the systemic persecution of Jews in Poland, Germany, and later France, Jabotinsky offered to lend the British his trained Jewish militants to fight against the Nazis, the same way he'd done during World War I. A year later, he died of a heart attack while visiting a training camp in New York. But that decision to assist the British in the war would divide the Irgun and its remaining leaders, who were now in British detention camps. Over what direction to take the militia, Avraham Stern decided to split from the group and form his own militia, the Lehi, or Stern Gang, and tried to raise funds by robbing British banks, which were almost never successful. Stern's ideas were even more radical than Jabotinsky's. He advocated for the expulsion or complete annihilation of Palestinians, describing Jews as a master race and Arabs as a slave race. Describing Jews as a master race and Arabs as a slave race.
So, who were the ones saying that they were the master race? This is during World War II, by the way. Interesting. That's, I'm not gonna say much. That's interesting. Wow. Sorry guys, that's all I gotta say on that one.
He and his group of small but fevered followers referred to themselves as terrorists, who believed that acts of terror were justified to reach their aims. Stern was so obsessed with fighting the British that in 1941 he wrote to Nazi authorities, pledging to fight alongside Hitler against the British if he agreed to help establish a Jewish state in Palestine.
He wanted to fight the British in order to gain independence. Stern, in his utter naivety, believed he could form an alliance with Hitler against the British.
He wanted to make an agreement with the Nazis so that the Nazis will send or let the Jews from Europe come here to Israel and be safe. And in addition, the Lehi will help the Germans by fighting the British.
But the Nazis never wrote back. Eventually, Stern was killed while attempting to flee an arrest warrant by British police. And while his group never gained the dominance he wished, it would continue to wield a significant impact on the events over the next few years. Meanwhile, as the horrors of World War II unfolded, David Ben-Gurion became engaged in the efforts to continue the illegal immigration of Jewish refugees to Palestine. Taking advantage of a distracted Britain, he employed the Haganah to organize a continuous fleet of vessels across the Mediterranean to sneak in thousands to the new Yishuv communities. By this point, there were close to 450,000 Jewish migrants in Palestine, though the British continued to restrict further official avenues for migration. And as the realities of the extent of the Holocaust were coming into light, the Zionists in the Irgun, who'd put aside their differences to fight alongside the British, were outraged and determined to take control of Palestine once and for all. By 1944, a young, devout follower of Ze'ev Jabotinsky had taken control of the militia. His name was Menachem Begin, and in 1944 declared an open rebellion against the British mandate, orchestrating a series of bombings on immigration offices in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Haifa.
Bombings, you say? Well, it's very...
Went after the tax offices, then the police stations. The Lehi joined in, taking part in a series of increasingly brazen attacks on British police officers, which eventually led to the assassination of Britain's Minister of State for the Middle East. On the 6th of November, Walter Edward Guinness, also known as Lord Moyne, was shot by two Lehi operatives outside his home in Cairo.
Is every person who works at a desk doomed to get a neck hump? Not if you do this thing.
So, just to recap, we have immigrants going to a foreign land. The people that are in that land allow them to come in and settle. Then, the Balfour Declaration says that those immigrants have the right to that land. Then, Britain backtracks a little bit and starts limiting still 75,000 people for every 5 years or something like that, or something around there, are still allowed to come in. That's not enough. So then they betray the British and start bombing, assassinating, and being self-proclaimed terrorists, saying acts of terror is the only way to get anything done. History of Israel.
His death sent shockwaves throughout the region and put the Zionists' fight for control of Palestine on the world stage. Lehi and Irgun accused Lord Moyne of being...
Oh, and I'm sorry, but we cannot just skip over the whole master race thing. You know, that's crazy, guys. Wow.
Architects of the White Paper, and used his death to send a message to Winston Churchill. One of Lehi's leaders and the brains behind the assassination, Yitzhak Shamir, later explained this in an interview.
He was against any Jewish aliyah, any Jewish immigration. He didn't believe that there exists such a thing like a Jewish nation or a Jewish people, and therefore we decided to make this operation.
It would not be Shamir's last assassination. Britain, still embroiled in the war, leaned on Ben-Gurion and Zionist leaders to quell the attacks, and the Haganah began going after Irgun and Lehi members, killing or detaining thousands of them in a period that would later be referred to as the hunting season. Fearing an outbreak of civil war, Menachem Begin instructed his militants to stand down, knowing that their actions had proven popular among the Jewish population in the Yishuv, and his plan paid off. Within months, anger at the Haganah's continued collaboration with the British forced the Zionist leaders to back down and join forces with Begin and the Stern Gang to launch a united Jewish resistance movement. The alliance between the three paramilitary groups escalated the attacks against the British and began to target vital infrastructure around Palestine: railroads, bridges, prisons, and police stations. It was now widely believed among the Yishuv that the British had betrayed their promise of a Jewish state, and that immigration restrictions had to be overturned to accommodate for the large population of refugees fleeing the end of World War II. But the alliance had to remain secret to protect the standing of Zionist leaders in Europe, a secret that was exposed in 1946 during Operation Agatha, sometimes referred to as Black Sabbath. The British conducted sweeping raids of Jewish settlements, arresting thousands of Zionist activists and militants, and obtaining a trove of documents that proved the Jewish agency, including David Ben-Gurion and the Haganah, were now working with the Lehi and the Irgun, both of whom were considered terrorist organizations. The raid infuriated the militants and threatened the fragile alliance. In retaliation, Menachem Begin ordered the Irgun to carry out an operation on the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, which was the base of the British Secretariat and where the confiscated documents were kept. On July 22, 1946, Irgun operatives placed a 350-kilogram bomb in the basement of the hotel, blowing up its southern wing and killing 91 people. Of them, 41 were Palestinians, 28 were British citizens, and 17 were Jews. The shock of the attack forced the Haganah to retreat once again, and Britain escalated its crackdown on Zionist activists. But the Irgun and Lehi persisted with their operations, targeting British police in assassinations and kidnappings and branching out into Europe. 3 months later, they blew up the British embassy building in Italy. Then in January 1947, Lehi operatives drove a truck full of explosives into a British police station in Haifa. It was called the world's first truck bomb. Then in March of that year, they blew up a British colonial club in London. Weary from the aftermath of World War II and struggling to control fighting in most of its colonies, Britain appealed to the newly formed United Nations to find a solution to the situation in Palestine. The UN, then made up of only 57 member states, voted to divide the British mandate into 3 states, with 55% of the land allocated to Jews, who only made up a third of the population. The state outline for Jews itself had a big demographic problem. Half of its residents were Palestinian, who rejected the proposal and sought help from another new organization, the Arab League. The British, feeling like the situation was no longer their responsibility, announced they were ending their occupation of Palestine on the 15th of May, 1948.
I have been instructed by His Majesty's government to announce with all solemnity that they have consequently decided that in the absence of a settlement, they must plan for an early withdrawal of British forces and of the British administration from Palestine.
But this announcement only further escalated the tensions, and almost immediately, a civil war broke out between Palestinians and the Yishuv. By January 1948, an estimated 1,500 Palestinians and 400 Jews were killed in the fighting. Ben-Gurion, fearing a retaliation from the neighboring Arab states, began to reshape the Haganah from a paramilitary group into the beginnings of a structured army, implementing mandatory conscription for all Jewish men and women aged between 17 and 25. With the clock racing towards the 15th of May, Ben-Gurion and the Zionist leaders saw the war as an opportunity to cleanse the Palestinian population from the areas mapped out by the UN partition plan. On the 10th of March, they met in Tel Aviv and outlined Plan Dalet, a blueprint for targeting Palestinian population centers in the Jewish partition state and enacting a policy of forced depopulation and destruction. That plan was effectively already underway, but over the next few months, it would escalate into a campaign of terror and ethnic cleansing across Palestine. On the 5th of January 19...
Why did we pay these guys to destroy their pants? Because bearskin cargo pants are the world's...
Guys, I'm not gonna lie, I've actually learned a lot this video. I hope you have too.
Haganah soldiers blew up the Semiramis Hotel in Jerusalem, reportedly killing 26 Christian Palestinians as well as the Spanish vice consul. On the 14th of February, Haganah's special forces, the Palmach, attacked the northern Palestinian village of Sa'sa in the middle of the night, blowing up 16 houses and killing 60 villagers. On April 9th, Irgun and Lehi militants jointly committed the infamous Deir Yassin massacre, where at least 107 Palestinian residents of the village, including women and children, were shot dead. Then the bodies were piled up on top of each other and burned.
המון ערבים היו, המון, עד שאספנו אותם, וזה לקח יומיים עד שאנחנו סילקנו את הגופות.
מה זאת אומרת סילקתם אותם?
מה לעשות? למה פחדנו שיבואו, יצלמו וילכלכו את השם של זה, מבינה? רצינו להעלים אותם.
On April 25th, Haganah forces entered the Jaffa town of Saqiya, killing 14 people. An eyewitness says the rest of the villagers left their homes and ran towards the nearest town. He saw 2 women who couldn't run, so they were shot. On May 22nd, after the residents of Tantura village near Haifa surrendered to the Haganah, between 40 and 200 men were rounded up, shot dead, and buried in a communal grave. Today, that grave has been paved over to build a parking lot.
Wow. Wow. You guys hear
100
that?
men were rounded up, shot dead, and buried in a communal grave. Today, that grave has been paved over to build a parking lot.
Wow.
תוקף זכותנו הטבעית וההיסטורית ועל יסוד החלטת עצרת האומות המאוחדות אנו מכריזים בזאת על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל, היא מדינת ישראל.
By the time Israel unilaterally declared itself a state on the 14th of May 1948, more than 200 Palestinian villages had been emptied, its people fleeing at gunpoint or in fear from the stories of massacres that happened in towns nearby. By the 15th of May, more than 750,000 Palestinians had been made refugees, never to return to their homes again. The testimonies from those who survived would be passed down from generation to generation, their descendants still holding onto the keys of the homes their grandparents had to flee. The testimonies of the Jewish militants who took part in the massacres that unfolded would take decades to come to light, and when they finally did, would be hard for Israeli society to stomach. The 15th of May is what Palestinians refer to as the Nakba, the catastrophe. For Israelis, this day is celebrated as their Independence Day. 2 weeks later, David Ben-Gurion, now the first prime minister of the new Jewish state, announced the formation of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, combining the Haganah and the Irgun, with the majority of Lehi members joining its ranks. They immediately turned their attention to fighting off the Arab Lehi members.
So, the Haganah started out very peaceful, or I don't want to say peaceful, but just to recap, we got Jewish settlers in Palestine, like 1917, way before World War II, and or really even before World War I too, so like 1908, 1906. Jewish settlers, and they hire Palestinian labor and Palestinian guard, and the person behind the Haganah, mostly Ben Gurion, wanted to centralize that, and so he wanted muscular Judaism is what they called it. So we have that. It seems, and everyone should be allowed to do that. You know, you don't have to hire guards. You should, want your people to be strong. Nothing wrong with that. But as tensions escalated with World War I and the Balfour Declaration and World War II, we were looking into terrorism, which they called themselves terrorists. They said acts of terror are the only way to get anything done. Bombings, assassinations. There's a direct quote we went over just a second ago where he says Jews are the master race and Arabs are the slave race. See if I can find that. Well, it's clipped, so go back a little bit in the stream and you'll see it. But yeah, man, so that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. And the IDF, the current military for Israel, is formed of these 3 organizations who bombed, assassinated British leaders whenever they were in Israel. Yeah.
Joining its ranks. They immediately turned their attention to fighting off the Arab coalition that had responded to Israel's creation and the displacement of Palestinians. The United Nations appointed Folk Bernadotte as the UN mediator in Palestine in an attempt to reach a diplomatic solution to the unfolding Arab-Israeli war. On the 16th of September, he outlined his proposal, a single union between Palestine and Jordan with 2 sovereign members, one Jewish and one Arab. It would also allow for displaced Palestinians to return to their homes in the now Jewish-controlled cities and villages. In a letter to the UN Secretary General, Bernadette wrote, quote, "It would be an offense against the principles of elemental justice if these innocent victims of the conflict were denied the right to return to their homes, while Jewish immigrants flow into Palestine, and indeed, at least offer the threat of permanent replacement of the Arab refugees who have been rooted in the land for centuries. That letter was published on the 18th of September.
Also, there is a common, like, you ask boomers or whatever, that they'll say, like, oh, most people will say, oh, they've been fighting forever, they're going to keep fighting. Not necessarily. There obviously was dispute for the Holy Land between, the Crusades and the Ottoman Empire and all that. Eventually, the Ottoman Empire won, and it was quite peaceful. And also, during the Christian occupation, it was quite peaceful. Eventually, the Christians gave up, and it was just a Muslim-occupied Arab Palestine. And it was like that forever until this started happening. And now it's been a non-stop massacres, non-stop battles, non-stop wars. So the Holy Land, I guess, will always be disputed over, but it's a little different this time around.
2 days after he had outlined his proposal, but by that time, he was already dead. The day before, while driving through Jerusalem, 4 Lehi operatives ambushed his motorcade and opened fire, killing him and another French military officer. The newly formed Israeli government...
And he was the mediator. All he was trying to do is find diplomatic solutions and keep the peace. And that's another assassination by the Lehi, which is now a part of the IDF.
Arrested 200 of Lehi's remaining members and put them on trial for terrorism and disbanding the group. Its leaders, including Yitzhak Shamir, were sentenced to prison, but their sentences would quickly be suspended and they were eventually pardoned. A few years later, Shamir would join a new political party formed by Irgun leader Menachem Begin around the revisionist Zionist ideals of their predecessor, Jabotinsky. It would be called...
And Jabotinsky was the first guy. I see we have a viewer in right now. Before you joined, we went over. Jabotinsky was the guy who separated from Ben Gurion, who was the first prime minister of Israel. Before that, he was the de facto leader of New Yashiv. And he separated himself from that and made his own organization, the Lehi, and started actually committing terrorism. And so these are his successors.
Or freedom. In a letter published in the New York Times in December 1948, some of the world's most prominent Jewish thinkers, including Albert Einstein and Hannah Arendt, described Menachem Begin and the Irgun as a terrorist, right-wing, chauvinist organization.
Listen, do you find yourself exhausted working every day, trying to do everything right? You went to school, you got...
Did you guys know that they offered the prime minister, like the first ever prime minister of Israel spot, they offered it to Albert Einstein, and he refused, saying that Zionism is a big problem and the terrorists, just like that. And he refused that right there too. He didn't refuse anything there, but he denounced that terrorist, right-wing, chauvinist organization in Palestine. They offered Albert Einstein to be prime minister of Israel, and he did not want to be associated with that, because Albert Einstein was a Jew. So, and some consider like, oh, he was the smartest person even, like, but the best of the best, that's who we want to represent us, and he declined. It's just something that's kind of crazy,
And compared the Harut Party in its organization, methods, political philosophy, and social appeal to the Nazi and fascist parties. The Israeli Defense Force would become the...
Seeing as they called themselves a master race like 10 minutes ago, yeah, I would say there's a lot of comparisons to Nazis for sure.
Foundation of the State of Israel, and its history of terror, assassinations, and ethnic cleansing would be wiped clean. The militant leaders who helped shape its bloody origins would go on to shape the country for decades to come. David Ben-Gurion's message of purity and restraint would become the narrative embedded in the army's propaganda, repeated to the world in response to growing criticism of its tactics. The historical voices who challenged this narrative from inside Israel would be outcast and ridiculed into silence. The Harut Party would remain on the fringes of Israel's parliament for the next 2 decades, but its ideas would slowly dominate the mainstream. In 1973, Menachem Begin would join forces with a former Haganah commander, Ariel Sharon, and expand Harut into a wider right-wing coalition called Likud. 4 years later, Begin would be elected Israel's prime minister. He'd be succeeded by former Lehi leader Yitzhak Shamir, who would serve as prime minister from 1983 to 1984 and again from 1986 to 1992. By this time, Likud and its revisionist Zionism roots had become an undeniable wing of Israeli politics, as well as its expansionist ambitions. And just 4 years after the end of Shamir's term, Likud would return to office under the stewardship and vision of a young, highly ambitious, and quietly ruthless prime minister. His name was Benjamin Netanyahu.
Netanyahu. Wow. So that's basically the history of the formation of Israel, guys. Quick recap. We have, so from the top, 1907, roughly, Jewish settlers were allowed into Palestine by the Arabs. They said, yeah, you can come, immigrants. They allowed them there. About 10 years later, Balfour Declaration, written by James Balfour, British government, to the Rothschilds, basically declaring that Palestine belongs to the Jews. Then mass immigration continues to happen. Tensions rise. Palestinians realize their land's being taken. The British occupation at the time was helping the Jews, and then some of them split off and decided that the British were a problem. They assassinated the British minister of Palestine or whatever, the guy in charge of relations, bombed a bunch of buildings. So, it looks very familiar to what's happening now, calling themselves the master race and the Palestinian people the slave race, the Arabs, and stating multiple times they want to expel them, right? So that's what we have there. And eventually just leads up to the formation of Israel, which is kind of crazy, because it's just betrayal, terrorism, lies, bombing, assassinations, and fucking with the British when the British were helping them. And somehow, at the end of the World War II, they still somehow were allowed to create the state of Israel, So it almost makes you think, is blood really the way things get done? Because that's kind of what it seems like. But anyways, guys, that's it for that one. Hope you enjoyed. Let's stop this recording real quick, and we're going to move on. So to my new viewer, I don't know if you can see my comments in the chat, but I'm not able to see any comments. So I don't know what's going on. I'm going to figure it out. But yeah, so I'm not ignoring you if you type anything. I literally cannot see it. But thanks for tuning in. Let's see what we got here. So we can get rid of that one. Oh, real quick, I gotta find that master race thing, because, that's kind of crazy. Let's see, where we at? Somewhere back here, right? Quick scan. I don't know if it'll show. It's not giving me Oh, well, that's a sign to stop then. Yeah, whatever. It's on the video. I'll find it later. So, the video Netanyahu doesn't want you to see. Let's talk about AI, guys. Specifically, AI water use. So I'm sure everyone knows about Hank Green. We used to watch him in school. Kind of like a Bill Nye type. So this is a video, hold on, sorry. This is a video about AI water use by Hank Green. I'm sure you've heard of him. We used to watch him in school, kind of like Bill Nye. So why is everyone so wrong about water use? AI water use is the title. So let's see what he has to say.
Sam Altman says that the average ChatGPT query uses around 0.000085 gallons of water, or roughly Sam Altman says that the average ChatGPT query uses around 0.000085 gallons of water, or roughly 1/15 of a teaspoon. But then, at the same time, somehow a Morgan Stanley projection predicted annual water use for cooling and electricity generation by AI data centers could reach around 1,000 billion liters by 2028. That's 1 trillion liters. On 11.
How many gallons is 1 trillion liters? 1 trillion is such a big number. Like, when someone says 1 trillion, I don't think we really realize how big that is, because it's, you know, a billion's 1,000 millions, and then trillion's 1,000 billions. That's crazy. How many gallons in a trillion liters? What a number. Let's see. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 264 billion, if I'm right. Let's see. 100,000, million, 10 million, 100 million, billion, 10 billion. 264 billion gallons of water used on AI. Just for cooling, just for AI data centers, which, by the way, have sprouted up across America like crazy. So that's something to note.
Increase from 2024 estimates. AI water use is extremely easy to mislead people about for a few different reasons. And one of them is that the average American has not updated their understanding of what water use is since they were in elementary school. And this is fine. We don't all need to understand this stuff, but then it gets dragged into the discourse, and of course we all talk out of our asses while experts rub their temples from the sidelines. So look, as far as I can tell, though OpenAI does not let people inspect the sources of their data, both of these numbers are true. 1/15 of a teaspoon per query, and 1 trillion liters of water per year by 2028. And you might think, okay, well, Morgan Stanley must just be imagining a future where there's a tremendous number of queries. But no. Actually, no matter how you multiply 1/15 of a teaspoon, you're never going to get anywhere close to 1 trillion liters of water use. The thing is, water consumption analysis, indeed any resource consumption analysis for an industry or a product or a conversation with a chatbot, is really tricky to do. There are multiple fields of economics and science devoted to this. If you're going to try and package that up into some nice, neat numbers that the average person will understand, you're going to be fudging a lot of stuff. So this seems like a good time to actually get into why it's so hard. But first, this video is brought to you by a little outfit called Ground News. Ground News is a website and app that determines all narrative to get the most clicks. And so not only is a lot of national rules passed by you, state unruled states, so it's depending on what I would. Why do data centers use .news/Hank, which you can also click in the description. So, why do data centers use water at all? So the actual computer chips that do the processing for AI get hot when they run, but also they don't work as well when they get too hot. So you gotta cool everything down so that everything runs optimally and the chips have their optimal lifespan, and you're optimizing everything so you get like the most processing power per unit of dollars you spend. Part of that is cooling everything down, and one of the most efficient ways to do that is with water. Many facilities use evaporative cooling, where they literally turn clean water into water vapor, and that water vapor carries the heat away. It's warmer, and it's taking the heat away. Good! Now, that's not the only way you do it. Some sites recycle water, or they use non-potable water, so water that's come out of a sewage treatment plant that you couldn't drink, but most of them still rely on fresh municipal water, the same water that a water company would be delivering to you, they are delivering to them. And this is important because municipal water is a kind of water. And yes, there are many different kinds of water, and the differences matter. Because look, no one's destroying the water here. The water that evaporates, it's just gonna fall down somewhere else eventually. But it does evaporate. It does go away. It is used up. And this is generally clean water that could be used for something else. It's been processed to be clean enough to drink and delivered using the same infrastructure as the rest of the city. And all that processing and all that infrastructure costs money, and it can't handle an infinite amount of water going through the system. This is industrial water use, but it's usually the same water as everything else. It's the municipal water. Now,
most industrial water, like for a paper mill or a steel plant, is self-supplied, not municipal. But data centers are mostly municipal, for now at least. Who knows what the future holds?
Use, but it's usually the same water as everything else. It's the municipal water. Now, OpenAI did not release information on where the water use figures come from, but I can make some guesses. First, Sam is talking about the water use per query. But importantly, different queries work different ways with AI, and many queries will actually result in multiple queries you never even see. This is something Sam Altman knows, but it's not something that most people know. Behind the scenes, when you ask GPT-5 a question...
By the way, Sam Altman is the CEO, head of OpenAI.
It frequently thinks. They call...
And OpenAI made ChatGPT, pretty sure, right? Let me look it up real quick. Pretty sure OpenAI is behind ChatGPT. Is OpenAI behind Chat GPT. Yeah, the company that created and owns ChatGPT. Yeah, so that's who we're talking about.
Reasoning models, and it thinks by like preparing and sending out other queries and then reading the results of those queries and then sending out more queries, and then maybe like it might spur a search of the internet. So if you ask it a somewhat complex question, it will run an initial query and then it will take that response, it will evaluate it using another query. It sometimes runs follow-ups until it's happy with the final answer. All those extra queries are additional queries. So one query might not be one query. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's a bunch. So this in itself might multiply this 1/15 of a teaspoon by like 15. I don't know, of course, because OpenAI doesn't share any of this information. But even in that situation, it's still just a teaspoon. I drink teaspoons all day long. That's, for me, not really the lie in Sam's lie here. And I am going to call it a lie because I think it is. The actual lie is that it is only counting the water used during the part of the life cycle when you're actually querying the chatbot, not all of the other parts of the process that are necessary for this system to exist. This is the big difference between Morgan Stanley's analysis.
It's called double speaking, guys. And I will give you a quick definition. But basically, it's to lie without lying. So you say like a half-truth. Like you say it, it's kind of true. Deliberately euphemistic, ambiguous, or obscure language. It's very common in politics. Give me an example. So, euphemisms, jargon, or ambiguity to disguise unpleasant realities, making bad things sound good or neutral, calling like job layoffs downsizing, or career alternative enhancement programs, describing war casualties as collateral damage, or referring to it, and you'll hear that a lot, by the way, or referring to a suicide as a negative patient care outcome or self-injurious behavior incident, right? So, it's not necessarily a lie. It's not necessarily the truth either. And so that's very common for politicians and businessmen. Pretty much anyone who has the public eye and isn't perfect, and we know no one's perfect, you're going to see that. Double speaking is not a good thing, I would say. And you really, everyone does it. But when it comes to important stuff like this, we really need to look out for that.
And Sam Altman's. There are a lot of other parts of this process that are not the final step of the consumer querying the chatbot. And you've probably thought of one of them, but you probably haven't thought of the biggest one. And I want to do a test right now and find out if I'm right. So if you thought of one place where the chatbot is using water that isn't the query, you probably thought of the training. The thing about these systems is that the training never really stops, even while we're using one model like GPT-5, which is actually a bunch of models all stuck together. OpenAI and its competitors are constantly training newer, bigger versions that no one can use yet. And to create these models, like the system runs for weeks or months on enormous clusters of GPUs, burning through electricity and water for cooling. It's not really fair to treat that training footprint as separate from every conversation you have with the model.
This is what's going to dry out the rivers. You know what I mean? I think this is, first of all, you're already seeing like, so in Texas, you know, it snows sometimes, it doesn't. It's not a good example of like what can, like if anything's bad has happened. But Colorado, it snows every year, you know? And so just recently there was a video, Colorado in December 2024 and Colorado in December 2025. 2024, hella snow, people are snowboarding on the sidewalk, you know, just Colorado things, you know? Colorado 2025 December, sun's out, no clouds, no snow. And you know, maybe it's a freak thing, but it's not likely, you know. And there's AI data centers all over the United States now. And I think we're starting to see just 1% of the downsides, where the more we let this go on, and it's going to go on, no one's going to stop this, it's going to get bad, I think. And bad by, I mean, you know, Nestle already said water's not a human right. So now, we originally were fighting with companies for water, you know, paying them for water, and now we're fighting with AI companies for water, and I think AI is getting the priority here. So yeah, just keep a lookout for that. It's changing the weather, and it's using a serious amount of water.
Could not happen training. So if you wanted to be honest, you got to make some choices. So probably you would want to spread the water used to train all of the models in GPT-5 and spread it across every query people make. Problem here is, no one knows how to do that accurately because OpenAI doesn't share this information, which is part of why it is so easy to get numbers that are both fairly correct and very different from each other. And part of why it's so easy to lie about this, from either direction, by the way. Like, you could include every training that has ever happened leading up to GPT-5, since certainly GPT-5 would not have been possible without those training events. Or you could just include the training of the models that are part of GPT-5. Or you could also include
GPT-5 is not one model, it's a model that is a bunch of models in a trench coat, and every query, it figures out which model it wants to use. Wow.
Training of models that are not being used yet. You could say if people didn't like and didn't use this product, then those training events wouldn't be happening, and so we should include those too. All those different choices will yield different results. If you want the number to look small, you could do that. If you want the number to look big, you could do that. And the training is a very big part of what makes these things work. Once you make a model, an individual query isn't that hard, but building the models is very energy intensive. According to estimates from the University of California, the training of AI models can account for around 50% of their total resource use. The training is big. And weirdly, Sam seems to have decided to not include it when discussing the water use of a ChatGPT query. Because look, it is true that any individual query doesn't use that water. With resource use analysis, you have to decide where to draw the line. But look, anyone doing actual analysis would definitely include the training because it's obviously a needed part of the process. But of course, this is messy. The more a model is used, the more the...
What did this say? Oh, I ain't reading all that. I say that now. I'm reading 493 metric tons of carbon emissions, 2.769 million liters of water, equivalent to about 24.5 years of water usage by a person in the United States. So, and that is when? Huh. Oh, that's just another number that someone's put out. 50% of that is from training. Wow. Pretty crazy.
Is used, the more the training cost in dollars, electricity, and water gets distributed across queries. That training water has already been consumed. It isn't being consumed anymore. Though, again, they are always training something new, and they seem to believe very powerfully that future training will be more, not less, resource intensive than current models, since that's the whole thing that's causing them to build data centers the way beavers build dams. The data center build-out is nuts. All of the system we have now works for what we have now. This is all build out for something bigger and better that we assume will materialize. This is a different conversation. Microsoft and Google and Amazon alone are collectively spending more than $100 billion a year on new data centers. I don't know if we could get into our heads how much money that is. But now I want to talk a little bit about what I see as like misleading in the other direction. And it's all going to make sense, but I find it misleading in the other direction. So if you have heard truly massive numbers relating to AI water use, the biggest source included in those analyses, I have not mentioned yet. This one is hidden enough that most people do not think of it. We know that data centers use lots of water, but they also use a lot of electricity. And you know what else uses a lot of water? Power plants, specifically thermoelectric power plants. So a lot of power plants work in the following way. First, you make heat, then you expose water to that heat. It expands into steam, and that expansion drives past a turbine, and that turbine then spins, and that creates the electricity. But then on the other side of this, nobody ever thinks about what happens. It doesn't just vent out into the atmosphere. You actually have to suck the steam through by recondensing the steam after it passes through the turbine. And the way you do that is by cooling off the steam, and the way you do that is by running the steam pipe through a bunch of cold water. So this is how natural gas and coal and nuclear power plants all work. And according to the U.S. Geological Survey, electricity generation accounts for, get this, 40% of all freshwater withdrawals in the United States. Now this is confusing though, because the power plants then just put a lot, not all, but a lot of that water back. So a lot of this water is intake and then return. And also importantly, none of this is municipal water. It has not gone through the process to make it safe to drink. It is not being piped through a municipal municipal water system that would need to scale up to manage this massive need, it is not sent to a sewage treatment plant. It is usually taken directly from a river, a lake, or the ocean, and then released back into that river, lake, or ocean. So some water will be lost to evaporation in this process. I wish I had the number in front of me. Hank from the future here, it's about 2 to 3%. So this is the water that people are sometimes counting if they want AI water use to look really massive. They are looking at the mix of power that AI data centers are using. And then they were looking specifically at the thermoelectric power plants that are part of that. They're looking at how much electricity is being drawn from those power plants, and then looking at what percentage of that power plant's water use can be attributed to the AI data center. And they are looking at water that is coming in and out, not just water that's being evaporated away. Now, I don't want to say that this doesn't matter. Power plants use a lot of water. A lot of it evaporates when the power plants are running. And also, the waste heat that ends up in waterways can have tremendous effects on ecosystems, and that needs to be managed and regulated. Waste heat is a kind of pollution. You can't just dump heat into the ocean or into a river and expect things to go fine. In fact, rivers often, only a degree or two of difference, can really mess things up. But including the water that flows through a power plant as water use, it does feel a little wrong to me. Taking water from a river or a lake is different from taking drinking water from a treatment plant. Putting drinking water on your lawn is actually cheaper per gallon for the water company than using it in your sink or shower, because it doesn't need to go through the wastewater treatment process. One kind of use is different from other kinds of use. But of course, even though municipal water and industrial water are not the same thing, that does not mean that water is like unlimited. Every place has a finite hydrological budget, a certain amount of water that can be pulled from rivers, lakes, reservoirs, or aquifers without causing real harm. You could shift where the strain shows up, because maybe it's in municipal treatment capacity, but maybe it's in an overdrawn aquifer, or maybe it's in a river whose temperature or flow is already stressed. But you cannot escape the fact that water is locally limited. A data center drawing from a lake is not competing with households for tap water, but it is drawing from the same watershed. And in a lot of places, that watershed is already fully allocated, but in a lot of places, that's not the case. So the question isn't just what kind of water is it using, it is also, does this place actually have the water to spare? Some places do, some places do not. And this is usually what we picture when we talk about saving water. A finite...
So I'm not an educated scientist, but what I'm seeing, or my hypothesis, my hypothesis from watching this and where my brain's going, is I think that, you know, originally it started out with like the steamboat and like the first electricity, you know, it was primitive compared to what we have now, but it also wasn't harmful. And so it's looking like our technology is going to surpass our ability to support it, if that makes any sense. So like, and obviously, you know, you want to keep progressing, you want to keep getting more technologically advanced and just making breakthroughs and stuff, but it's going to come to a point where we can no longer support, we don't have the resources. And this isn't just the United States, I'm talking about the whole world here. Eventually the whole world will not have enough resources to continue. What's up?
Oh, I'm just grabbing my drink, I'm sorry.
You're good. Anyways, that's kind of, thank you. That's kind of where my brain's going right now. But yeah, I'm not a scientist, so some of this is going over my head.
Pool of usable water in a particular place. And that's part of the story, but not the only part, because what kind of water you need can matter just as much, if not more, as how much there is. A great example of this, a lot of water is actually used to make the chips that run AI data centers, like those NVIDIA GPUs. A huge amount of water is necessary for the creation of those, and that is part of the life.
Man, at my old job, I talked about this a little bit last stream, but we helped build a computer chip factory here, like probably like less than 10 minutes from where I live. And the amount of water, like obviously we had to build it first, but once it was built and we're doing final touches or whatever, the amount of water they were bringing in to like gallons on gallons on gallons, like probably hundreds of thousands, I'm not gonna lie. And you know, I'm not really sure exactly what 100,000 gallons looks like in person, you know what I mean? But like it was a shit ton of water. And I always wondered, I was like, it seems like a lot of water, you know? And yeah, it's just really strange. Really strange.
Now, when you compare that to the water used for cooling, it's very small. But it's a different kind of water. It's not just not lake water. This has to be ultra pure water that has like nothing in it. It's like extremely distilled to make sure that there's nothing in it that could possibly mess up the chips. So it's a very...
the minerals in water will mess up the chips, yeah.
Small fraction of the amount of water used in the process of AI existing. But that water is harder to produce than drinking water. It requires way more energy to produce than drinking water. And that's not something that like anybody needs to know unless they're experts working on this problem. Now, most of the water used to cool data centers also doesn't go to sewage treatment plants, just like irrigating your lawn. That water doesn't go to sewage treatment plants. Most of it gets evaporated away, but a fair portion actually does end up going to treatment because once a lot of water evaporates away, minerals don't evaporate away and they start to build up, and then that has to be like blown out before it starts to create a problem for the evaporators. And that has to go somewhere to get treated. In fact, it sometimes needs special treatment because the minerals that are left behind can make it acidic, and you don't want to release a bunch of acid into a river. My point here overall is that this is complex. And that means to me two things. One, it's really easy to mislead about it. It's easy to misrepresent by leaving out training and making the water use seem really small. It's easy to misrepresent by including water flowing through a power plant to make water use seem even bigger than it is. But the second thing that I hope you walk away from this video with is that like I know next to nothing about this. Like I have a master's degree in environmental studies that's old, by the way, is pre-AI. So I have like some basis from which to start doing the research necessary that I did to write this video. But I still know basically nothing. Like if an expert watches this video, they're gonna see a ton of holes in it. They're gonna be like, that thing's kind of wrong, and like, oh, he forgot about this. Like, this is the reason why expertise is so important, because the discourse is terrible at expertise. But there are people who are actually involved in this conservation, who are actually involved in trying to like mitigate this, to decrease the water use, and they are aware that AI is just one of many industrial uses of municipal water, and that is very different from water evaporating at a power plant that isn't coming from municipal water. So here's the crazy part, because any resource manager will tell you that use is one part of the story, and often the smaller part of the story. What matters most is where you're using it, the context around the use. A bunch of data centers in the desert is a totally different game than a bunch in the Pacific Northwest. Water is not like electrons. It is hard to move around. If you use water where it's scarce, it matters a lot more than if you use it where it's plentiful. And it also matters how you respond to that. When you build a data center in the desert, do you make sure you're running your cooling with non-potable water from a treatment plant? Is that taking away from water that would normally be used for turf irrigation? And now,
imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
And now the turf is being irrigated by municipal water, or maybe you're responding by building systems that recycle the water, or maybe you're responding by using air cooling, which might use more electricity, but that's fine if there's a lot of solar nearby. To wrap this up, let me hit you with something that is very, very weird. AI data centers are going to use a lot of water, but they are not going to use anything like as much water as the weirdest industrial use of water that we have. It is so weird. I hate it so much. Corn is one of the thirstiest major crops grown in the US. On average,
corn is also fake. And Bill Gates corn, that's another thing about agriculture, guys. Bill Gates corn. Bill Gates corn. So, GMO corn, look at the images. Set to stop man from... So, Bill Gates funded GMO contraceptive corn that makes people infertile, set to save the world from overpopulation, right? So that's what we're looking at there. It's been approved. Like, I mean, so if you see a box of anything really, and it says contains genetically modified, I wouldn't eat it personally. I mean, make your own decisions. People will argue that the big argument is actually that, well, corn's genetically modified because it used to be small, like bananas, you know. But still, just keep that in mind, dude. Like, Bill Gates owns like all the farmland. And yeah, corn, potatoes. Dude, potatoes are like one of my favorite things to eat. You know, like you can bake them, make French fries, chop it up, huevos con papas, you know, Mexican, you know. Tons of things you can do with potatoes. And just recently they approved a it's pesticide spray or spray with PFAS, forever chemicals. Let's look it up. Forever chemical spray potatoes. Let's see if that'll Yes, forever chemicals are being used in pesticides sprayed on crops, including, hold on, let's see, make sure you guys can see this, including potatoes, raising health and environmental concerns. Although EPA claims approved uses are safe, while scientists warn about long-term buildup and potential risks like cancer. So PFAS, they're called forever chemicals because they resist breakdown. They never, you know, they can live in your body forever, right? And so obviously we want to avoid those as much as possible, you know. But the EPA, which is supposed to protect our food sources, has approved this. So now it's even like, I feel bad eating potatoes. I'm a little scared that I'm going to have forever chemicals because you just don't know. So definitely wash everything for sure. Yeah, but that's just something I wanted to show you guys. But yeah, let's get back to this video. We're almost done.
It takes between 600,000 and 1 million gallons of irrigation water to grow an acre of corn, depending on rainfall and region. Corn uses orders of magnitude more water than AI. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, U.S. corn production requires around 20 trillion gallons of water per year, compared to the total estimated global AI data center water use of around 260 billion gallons. In other words, American corn alone uses nearly 80 times more water annually than all of the world's AI servers combined. And I
feel like he's trying to downplay that, though, because the thing about, you know, we have our beef with corn or whatever, but at least when you water the corn, it goes back into the soil. It's a part of the natural cycle of things. But these AI data centers are like making water disappear. That's the problem, you know. And we determined earlier, what, 264 billion gallons of water, right? Something like that. An unimaginable number. More than Elon Musk's net worth in dollars, or maybe he's surpassed that. Maybe he's at 300 billion now. But like, you know, like if you had that amount of money, you would be either the richest man in the world or like second place. You know what I mean? So that's how much gallons of water we're talking about.
Forgive you if you are thinking right now, okay, Hank, yes, but corn is food. We eat it. Food is very important for people. But that's the thing. We don't eat it. Maybe 1% of corn is eaten by humans. A lot of it is eaten by livestock. But 40% of it is burned in our cars and trucks. That acre of corn that evaporated 1 million gallons of irrigation water will get you roughly 500 gallons of ethanol. So before we even talk about processing, every gallon of ethanol already carries an irrigation footprint of around 1,500 gallons of water. Extend that to 40% of the U.S. corn crop, and yeah, it is tens of trillions of gallons of water being evaporated by corn so that we can burn.
Well, we shouldn't even have ethanol in our gas to begin with. Correct me if I'm wrong, but let's just look it up. Why is there ethanol in gas? To help oxidize the fuel and help it burn faster. But there are many engines that have to have ethanol free because ethanol is bad. Prevent engine knocking. So, did they change the engines for climate change or something? Older engines can be vulnerable to damage from higher ethanol blends. Regardless, we could live without ethanol in our gas, right? Just like we can live without AI. But so you're comparing sources of water that we can't live without, or like uses of water that it would be really hard to live without compared to sources that it would be really easy to live without. You know what I mean? I really don't like how he's kind of dancing around everything here. I mean, he's given a very nuanced point of view. I wish he would be a little more ballsy.
To move our cars and trucks around. But also, take a step down, there are different kinds of water, and this is not municipal water. But if the water passing through a power plant counts as water use, then I think it's fair to say this does as well. And also, you want to know what definitely uses municipal water? The trillions of gallons of water that we use to irrigate our lawns every year. I find this all very interesting. When we talk about water use, it makes sense that you and I don't have a deep understanding of all of this complexity. You do not need to have the level of complexity that you now have having watched this video. I don't really need to have it either. The reality is, some areas are right up against their hydrological budgets. They can't have new uses. Others have room. Some uses, like irrigating the entire Corn Belt, involve staggering amounts of water that we've just learned to see as normal. And I get why people jump on AI water use. Wasting water feels immoral. We are told our whole lives to turn off that sink while we brush. And that feels so inconsequential next to industrial use, and industrial use honestly feels inconsequential next to agricultural use. In specific places that are up against their hydrological budgets, it can absolutely make sense to not add new use and to save every bit we can. Building a water-cooled data center in Tucson is just very dumb. It's a bad idea. It's dumb as shit. But on the whole, I think there are people who understand these systems much better than I do, who will be working on the resource planning and doing an okay job of it, and with water use specifically. Now, it's going to be a big deal in some areas. I don't want to say it's never going to be a big deal. Like, I don't want people to come for me. Even under the maximalist goals of AI companies, the projected increase in water use is small compared to what cities and industries already use. What I am much more worried about is that the projected increase in power demand is not small. It is an order of magnitude larger in like the percent of existing infrastructure. That's going to hit our carbon budgets and it's going to hit our wallets. I think this is a bigger deal politically. I think it's a bigger deal environmentally. That's where I am more focused personally. Like maybe water use feels more.
He does make a good point about the grid. You know, it might get to the point where our use of electricity is limited in order to, you know, save for AI. You know, and that's very dystopian, but there's a chance that might happen. But yeah, no, he makes a good point there that the grid might be more of an issue than the water. But I think they're both an issue. I just think AI shouldn't exist at all. I think I don't think it's done anything good. Name one good thing AI has done. For real, name one good thing. All I see is people getting dumber, using AI to answer everything and call them artificially intelligent, right? I mean, I seriously, and I'm really not being biased here, I seriously cannot think of one good thing AI has accomplished. There's no reason for it. I mean, like Terminator and The Matrix warned us, you know what I mean? Like, we've been warned against this and we do it anyways. You know, just, that's my opinion.
Salient because it feels worse to waste water, but in terms of actual impact, on average, I think that the power is going to be the bigger deal. But it's also very hard to compare them, right? Because like river health has very little to do with your power bill. Like those things are very separate problems from each other. But honestly, even more than either of these things, I remain really unconvinced that these planned build-outs are actually going to happen. And if they don't, we've got this other set of very big problems. Like if we've spent like $1 trillion on NVIDIA chips, and it turns out the compute isn't needed because more compute doesn't actually improve these systems as much as advertised, or because environmental or political constraints slow everything down, then my bigger concern is that we will have swallowed a story that is, I know, like exciting and compelling. Like, I don't want to say these technologies aren't interesting.
Sorry, it was a really just gross ad, so I had to report it.
Like, maybe not as immediately world-changing as the billionaires racing each other around seem to think. And if we have bet like a fairly large percentage of the S&P 500 and also quite a bit of our current economic growth on this future that just doesn't materialize immediately, even if it does eventually, but not immediately, my biggest concern, is this bubble popping. I am worried about that. I think that our entire economy is being wagered by not very many people making very strange choices based on an imagining of the future that is honestly, I don't think likely to occur, which is not the topic of the video, but I ended up here anyway because I started talking about what I'm most worried about. Like, I can't predict the future. No one can predict the future. As Cory Doctorow likes to say, I love this. If you could predict the future, it would mean that we have no agency, and what a terrible outcome that would be. We do have agency. We can affect these things. I remain fairly unconvinced that people are going to...
Okay, so yeah, that's what he has to say. And let's see this. This is Sam Altman, the leader of OpenAI or whatever. This is what Sam Altman doesn't want you to know. And this is the last thing we'll go over on the AI, but it's just what I want to hear what it has to say.
Watch this clip of Sam Altman having a very strange reaction to an interviewer who's pretty friendly to big tech, and I'll explain in a second.
How can the company with $13 billion in revenues make $1.4 trillion of spend commitments And you've heard the criticism,
First
Sam.
of all, we're doing well more revenue than that. Second of all, Brad, if you want to sell your shares, I'll find you a buyer. If you think I just, enough.
So why does Altman seem so upset here? After all, this interviewer is just pointing out a basic fact, that OpenAI has committed to spend over $1 trillion on AI infrastructure over the next 8 years, despite only bringing in around $13 billion a year in recurring revenue,
still
less
a
than
shit ton.
1% of what they're promising to spend. I'm no money genius, and I'm personally terrible at budgeting, but that doesn't seem great. Most of the supposed growth in the American economy in 2025 was caused by investment in AI. That's all part of a promise being made by the industry, led by Sam Altman, that once a certain level of machine learning intelligence is reached, all of our problems will be solved.
The housing crisis, cancer, poverty, climate change, mental health, democracy, universal basic income, cure a bunch of diseases, this cancer and that one, and heart disease.
Helping you try to accomplish your goals and be your best.
Very high quality health.
You know who he looks like? He looks like the guy. I was typed in the guy off of You, who's dating that the British season. What's his name? Freaking he like was a gambler or something. Hold on, let's look up You season. Was it 3 or 4? I'm trying to think. I think it's 3 cast. Yeah, right? No, season 4. Season 4. Yeah, that's right. Yes, I've seen the show. I have a girlfriend. Okay. But let's see. So yeah, Penn Badgley is Jonathan Moore or whatever. Marianne, Kate. There he is. Adam Pratt. Right. So let's look up Adam Pratt. Adam Pratt. You. Dude, it actually looks like pretty close. Except this guy looks like he has a little bit higher testosterone. Dude, that's pretty close, guys. Look. That's pretty close. Side by side. Let me move these tabs. So he's looking towards the right. That's a side by side. Dude, that's pretty fucking close. Yeah, so that's what it reminded me of. Anyways.
Important new scientific discoveries. The marginal cost of energy are going to trend rapidly towards zero. The more equal world.
Universal extreme wealth for everybody.
In exchange for all that, Altman is asking all of society to put all of our eggs, our data, our economy, our water and resources.
Did you really need to get some eggs for that, bro? Did you? For real?
Everything into one basket. His. He's offering us one massive, just trust me, bro. So, should we trust Altman? Should we accept his deal? Is it even our choice? Altman isn't a technologist or scientist. He's an investor and deal maker, and really good at it, supposedly. But his whole career is a series of just trust me, bro moments. So let's examine the deal Altman is offering all of us. Should we believe Sam Altman's promises? And what's the cost to the rest of us if those promises turn out to be lies? So let's go back and look closer at...
So the majority of my research actually has been on Peter Thiel, and I just saw a recommended video. We probably won't hit it tonight, but we'll hit it eventually. But yeah, I actually don't know much about Sam Altman.
Early days in the tech industry. Altman's first big deal was selling his first company, Looped, a service for locating your friends. That's something that inherently needs lots of users to work, or else you're just locating yourself.
The operative idea seems to be ubiquity. I mean, get it out there in more ways than you can possibly imagine.
And make it available to everybody.
But the whole time, Looped refused to say how many users they had. Altman just insisted there were, quote, way more users than any other similar service. It turns out, though, that towards the end, Looped only had 500 users.
Damn.
When Reuters reported this, Altman insisted it was 100 times more than that, and that he'd provide evidence. He never did. Just trust me, bro. Looped sold to the Green Dot Corporation, who shut it down immediately and never used any of the tech. Green Dot investors allege it was a dirty deal done to enrich Sequoia Capital, a VC firm with a stake in Looped, and 2 board members at Green Dot who helped approve the deal. Altman left Green Dot as soon as he was legally able, walking away with millions for building an app that no longer existed in any form. And luckily for Altman, someone saw something in him. Peter Thiel.
There he is.
Thiel, who once said that Altman should be treated as, quote, more of a messiah figure, gave Altman millions to start his own VC firm, Hydrazine Capital. And that's not all the capital Altman controlled. He was also hired as president of Y Combinator, or YC, an influential venture capital firm and startup incubator, where Looped got its original funding.
I think the president of YC is sort of the unofficial leader of the startup movement.
And Altman personally traded on that influence. The New Yorker reports that up to 75% of Hydrazine's capital was invested in YC companies. Altman used his inside view to get a cut of YC's power, despite Altman promising he didn't cross-invest in YC companies. That's two big lies so far: the user base of Looped that needed users to exist, and his investments. In 2015, Altman leads YC into the investment you likely most know him for.
He's sort of a semi-company, semi-nonprofit doing AI safety research.
OpenAI was launched as the supposed nonprofit OpenAI Foundation, with a charter with a lot of lofty goals, a primary fiduciary duty to...
You know what I mean? Like when you hear someone talk and like, it's like they're not using air, so it's like, you know what I mean? Like he needs a microphone to project, you know, like without the microphone, you would never be able to hear him in a crowd of people, you know? Like, deep breath and fucking say it with your balls, dude. Like, maybe I'm being rude, but it's just that type of voice just gets on my nerves.
Humanity, and avoiding enabling uses of AI or AGI that harm humanity or unduly concentrate power, while acting to minimize conflicts of interest among our employees and stakeholders. The evidence that they do that? Just trust me, bro. OpenAI's primary financial backers were tech billionaires and millionaires like Altman himself, Peter Thiel, Reid Hoffman, and Elon Musk, and tech companies like Amazon Web Services and Infosys.
We wanted to build this with humanity's best interest at heart.
But in exchange, OpenAI is asking for a lot, putting all of society's eggs in one basket, if you will. They want electricity, water, infrastructure, capital, your data, your writing, your art, and for humanity to adjust to job loss, deepfakes, and everything else. All in exchange for some future promise of technology that fixes everything. So, can we trust him with all of this?
No, we can't. That's a great point. Honestly, the egg thing was a little ridiculous, but yes, exactly. Deepfakes, people's lives can be ruined by AI now. The water use, the grid use. What good comes from AI, genuinely? You know, I doubt that. I wonder if the AI response is going to, you know, let's see what the AI response says. But has any good come from AI? Significant good, okay. Revolutionizing fields like healthcare, environmental science. Okay, yeah, but I don't see that happening as often as I see ChatGPT and stuff like that, you know? I think AI could be used for like a lot of great things, but I don't think it is being used, you know? But you know, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe this just doesn't get the screen time, you know? But AI overview. Yes, significant good has come from AI. Stop questioning me, bro. Yeah.
Let's look at some of his biggest statements and promises to show how they tie to all the eggs in the basket. Altman insists he doesn't own any of OpenAI, and he barely takes his salary.
I paid enough for health insurance. I have no equity in OpenAI. I'm doing this because I love it.
But he doesn't hide that he's already rich, trying to do a rich guy using money for good Batman thing.
That Batman, such a wonderful person, but I don't deserve it.
But we millionaires decided that you do.
But let's look at how this is part of his honesty problem. And it ties in to the eggs in the basket, because Altman is invested in all the stuff necessary to build OpenAI. One of the eggs OpenAI needs is a ton of data. You can't build a large language model without examples of language and content. And one source of that data is Reddit. Altman owns a big share of the social networking site and was on its board until 2022. Reddit got its start in the same inaugural Y Combinator class as Looped. Here's Altman standing next to Reddit co-founder Aaron Swartz in 2005. Swartz died by suicide in 2013 after being criminally charged for reproducing academic articles online and breaking copyright law. In 2015, Altman made a deal with Reddit, allowing OpenAI to, quote, basically aggressively scrape everything posted on the site to feed into OpenAI's tech. Reddit co-founder Alex Ohanian felt in his bones the deal was wrong. It's a less noble version of what Reddit co-founder Aaron Swartz was targeted by law enforcement for. Swartz wanted to open the knowledge up to everyone. Altman wanted to put it in his product. In 2014, Altman promised that he and other investors would give 10% of Reddit's value back to the Reddit community. That never happened due to regulatory issues. But just like Reddit's data going to OpenAI, a look at the areas Altman's wealth is invested in show a deep connection to other needs of the organization. He's invested in AI networking equipment companies, thermal battery companies, and even companies mining the rare earth metals that server farms require. And once it's all built, Altman will profit off the problems AI creates. We're going to focus on three: rising energy demands and costs, misuse like fraud and deepfakes, and job loss and economic collapse. Altman says again and again that OpenAI needs more power. The, quote, audacious long-term goal is to build 250 gigawatts of capacity by 2033. That much compute would require as much electricity as 1.5 billion people, the equivalent of the entire population of India. But Altman has a solution. Since they first met in the early 2000s, Peter Thiel and Sam Altman have had a shared interest: investing in nuclear power. Which isn't inherently bad, of course. Nuclear can be an extremely efficient and clean form of energy. But Thiel and Altman want to own it. Altman is invested in Helion and Oklo. Helion is working to build the first ever nuclear fusion power plant, a type of energy creation that many scientists say won't work. And Oklo is building microreactors, literally truck-sized nuclear reactors, which is a bit concerning considering this investment strategy.
Part of our model is make the cost of mistakes really low and then make a lot of mistakes.
But for now, Oklo hasn't figured their reactors out yet, and are just using gas to keep up with the promises they made.
Nuclear startup Oklo and natural gas firm Liberty Energy today announcing a partnership to provide energy to large-scale customers.
Altman is also invested in multiple companies offering protection against AI bad actors, identity verification to prevent deepfakes, and even companies offering insurance for losses due to AI scams and hacking. That's like Batman not making any money off of crime fighting, but then selling Batmobile drove into my house insurance, while also running the Uber for henchmen startup that the Riddler.
That was kind of funny.
Batman not making insurance for losses due to AI scams and hacking. That's like Batman not making any money off of crime fighting, but then selling Batmobile drove into my house insurance, while also running the Uber for henchmen startup that the Riddler uses and selling the Joker white makeup. One other big promise Altman makes is that when the AI he sees as inevitable makes many jobs obsolete, it'll create so much wealth that it can be shared with everyone, just like his smaller scale Reddit promise that turned out to be bullshit. And in 2024, he announced the product that'd supposedly offer that shared abundance.
WorldCoin.
WorldCoin. WorldCoin. WorldCoin.
WorldCoin is a technology company and cryptocurrency funded by all the usual suspects of techno-fascism. WorldCoin's backers say it can be a way to give out some form of universal basic income when AI starts replacing jobs.
I think this idea that we have a global currency that is outside of the control of any government is a super logical and important step on the tech tree.
But it also sells itself as a solution to identity verification problems created by AI. They want to use these orbs as a method of trusted identity check, and you don't get your universal basic income until you scan your eyes into the orb. And like many of Altman's other projects, from Looped to ChatGPT, it requires universal adoption to be of any business use. A currency and identification system are pretty useless if other people don't use them. So again, Altman is making an offer. Give us your identity, and we'll give you cryptocurrency. It's a classic Altman deal. I'll fix everything if you sign over everything. Just trust me, bro. It's almost like Altman wants to build a whole other economy, just in case the one we have now falls apart. Well, we'll get to that. In 2019, OpenAI gave up.
So yeah, this is the first I'm hearing about WorldCoin, but it seems to be we're getting into like kind of mark of the beast areas here. This might be the one world currency whenever the systems fall, you know, and this is all thoughts, just thinking, but it's the first time hearing about it. And I mean, you gotta have the identity. Yeah, it's very possible. I don't know. Wow, it's the first time ever hearing about it.
Pretense of being nonprofit and started a for-profit branch, then spun the for-profit out into its own entity in 2024. That for-profit organization has none of the same legal responsibilities as the nonprofit did, and brought in new investors like Microsoft, which invested $13 billion, which OpenAI largely spent on Microsoft products. And it's not just Microsoft. Nvidia has promised to invest $100 billion in OpenAI over the next few years, money that OpenAI will spend buying Nvidia chips. OpenAI has similar circular deals with AMD, the Qatari government, and Larry Ellison's Oracle.
How about the $20 you owe me? Well, I only got 10, so here's 10 and I owe you 10. Thanks. Hey, Mo, you owe me 20. Well, here's 10 and I'll owe you 10. You owe me 20. Here's 10, I owe you 10. Here's 10, I owe you. Here's 10, I owe you. Here's 10, I owe you. Good, now we're all even.
The entire economy is tied to the success of Altman's project.
We might screw it up. Like, this is the bet that we're making, and we're taking a risk along with that.
Who is the we taking the bet? Here's OpenAI's CFO.
Banks, private equity, maybe even governmental, the ways governments can come to bear.
Meaning like a federal subsidy or something?
Meaning like just first of all, the backstop, the guarantee that allows the financing to happen.
Through all of that stammering, the CFO of OpenAI is making a clear point. The government, your tax dollars, are responsible for saving the AI project. That's more eggs,
dude,
in the basket.
Will you get?
And that basket is based on the promises
stop
of
with
Sam
the
Altman,
freaking eggs
who,
already.
as we've illustrated, lies and breaks promises a lot. So if we really look at the basket, maybe we shouldn't have been putting all those eggs in there.
And it gets worse. While we were editing this video, news broke that OpenAI is seeking a $750 billion valuation and is in talks with Amazon for a $10 billion investment. That's money that OpenAI would spend on Amazon infrastructure. So I'm gonna need more eggs.
Oh my
Thank
gosh.
you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to support more of
all right, egg boy. Well, guys, yeah, so in conclusion, AI is using like hundreds of billions of gallons of water, and it's projected to go up to, and this isn't just non-potable water, this is drinking water being used up. In fact, they were calling us to stop drinking as much water. AI CEO says stop using water. Image. Yeah, so Sam Altman himself, he urges people to stop drinking water to conserve supplies for AI. But then he says, you know, we went over that each ChatGPT query only uses merely a 15th of a teaspoon, but, you know, you're not thinking about all the training and the cooling and just everything in general. So, yeah, guys. And on top of that, he's also a fraud, it seems like. Seems like most of his companies have not worked out at all. He's been lying, and he's promised things that have not fulfilled, including money. And he wants us to give him our identities, and then he'll give us cryptocurrency. So yeah, just trust me, bro, seems to be his main thing. So yeah, that is the AI dilemma. Thank you guys for watching. All right. Been going at it for 3 hours. I think we might be calling it. But let me check. Let me see. Is there anything else we want to watch? I'm over the AI stuff right now. The Joe Rogan Experience. I think this is good for tomorrow. We can watch this short video about authoritarianism, though. Alright, what's up, everybody? Last video of the night. It's called Authoritarianism is Here. It was posted a month ago, I believe. Let's check real quick. Oh, by Legal Eagle, yeah. So let's see what they have to say. Nice frog.
Like a frog boiling in its own water, America is slipping towards authoritarianism, and it may already be too late. If you've ever wondered, how could X country just let that happen? Well, congratulations. You're living in the answer. This isn't a could happen, it's happening. And contrary to popular belief, authoritarianism doesn't always arrive via dramatic military coup. Democracies can, and often do, slide into authoritarianism.
Real quick, before we go with this, I want to show you guys something. So the book 1984 was banned in China. It was banned in America. It's not banned anymore, but it was during the McCarthy era. So let's look this up. Why was 1984 banned in the US? So, well, it did have sexual content, but challenged it for being pro-communist, right? Why was 1984 banned in China? In the China. Huh, maybe it was Russia then? Soviet Union viewed it as powerful anti-communist weapon. So it was banned in the US because of it was pro-communist. Banned in the right here. So this is what we're looking at. The USSR, it said in China too, but I guess it wasn't, but right there. Banned in USSR and China and the United States. So banned in USSR for being anti-communist, banned in US for being pro-communist. So a book cannot be anti-communist and pro-communist. What it is anti-authoritarianism. It's anti-totalitarianism. It's anti-authoritarian, which tells you a lot. The fact that it was banned in both, right? So yeah, so that's just the point I wanted to make there. Now let's get back to that video.
Quietly, and procedurally. There are three obvious pillars of a slide towards authoritarianism: consolidation of force and suppression of dissent, undermining the rule of law and electoral guardrails, and patronages, purges, and the destruction of independent institutions. And in just the last few months, what have we seen? Tens of thousands of career civil servants purged from the government. Masked, unaccountable federal police deployed, answering only to Trump. An immigration crackdown escalating into effectively internment camps, torture sites, and secret renditions to war zones, ensnaring citizens and non-citizens alike. Thanks, Justice Kavanaugh. Political prosecutions of rivals, dissidents, and members of the opposition party. The destruction of the rule of law through mass pardons of his team and the shutting down of investigations into his allies. For example, the January 6th insurrectionists, corrupt Republican politicians, donors, and business associates. The invasion of blue cities and states by the National Guard and Marines under the excuse of a manufactured peacetime emergency. Systematic demonization and othering of targeted groups. Immigrants and trans people blamed for every single societal problem. Ignoring court orders. Ignoring Congress by spending money that was never appropriated and refusing to spend money that was. Publicly flirting with an unconstitutional third term as president, like a coquettish little tyrant in waiting. What a scamp. Attacking, suing, and banning media outlets that dare to criticize him. And enriching himself to the tune of billions of dollars through his crypto empire, self-dealing with his own business.
So that hinting at a third term or whatever was, well, at least what I'm aware of, is he was in a meeting with Zelensky, the leader of Ukraine, and obviously, Zelensky was telling him that whenever you're in wartime, that no elections can be had because you're in wartime, and that's what happened with FDR. I believe it was FDR, or was it Eisenhower? The World War II, FDR, right? Yeah. So Trump was like, "Oh, really? So if there's war, then I can stay in office. And Zelensky was like, you like that, don't you? And he was like, yeah, I do. And then they laughed about it, right? So he's flirting with the idea of staying in office illegally or starting a war to stay in office. And martial law also would cause that too. And, you know, he can determine martial law from pretty much any, like if he determines that there's unrest in the union, then, you know, martial law, and then he's here, at least temporarily, you know. But war would be a way to stay in for a long time. So keep an eye out for that. The Trump meme coin.
And enriching himself to the tune of billions of dollars through his crypto empire, self-dealing with his own businesses, and selling access to the White House. This is the authoritarian trifecta, consolidating state power, undermining the rule of law, and unrestrained corruption. And we're not even a year into a 4-year term. If you saw this happening anywhere else in the world, you would call it the opening phase of a failed state. Political scientist Juan Linz identified 4 defining features of authoritarianism: limited political pluralism, constraints on legislatures, parties, and interest groups, legitimacy built on emotion, the leader as a necessary evil fighting societal decay, minimal political mobilization paired with the suppression of anti-regime activity, and vague, ever-expanding executive powers, undefined and shifting at will. And that describes America in 2025 with uncomfortable precision. Now, we recently released a video compiling all the crimes and corruption that Trump has committed so far, because, frankly, there's been so much that even we, professional lawyers...
Guys, it's a 40-minute video, so go watch that on your own. I don't think we're gonna put that on stream.
We're starting to lose track. And I'm sure we still miss some. We made that video because normal people, even extremely intelligent ones, have a hard time grasping the full scope unless they are immersed in it every single day. I was at a wedding recently talking to a friend who is an incredibly intelligent, high-powered attorney. We were making conversation about what was going on in the world, and he asked why I was so worried about this country. And when I rattled off a partial list like the one you just heard, he was aghast. Because unless you're watching the news for several hours a day, it's just impossible to keep track.
He makes a great point. It's exactly what I've been trying to say. Ah, shit. It's exactly what I've been trying to say. If you are not constantly paying attention to this, and sometimes even if you are, you know, but let's just say the average person, you'll see it on Instagram, oh, Epstein list, still not released. You know, it's just weird because in the past year you just see like every now and again it comes back up, the Epstein list is still not released. But then you have Venezuela, just like in the last month, right? Let's just take the last month. So much overload, right? Venezuela, ICE shooting, Syria bombing, Iran protests were threatening to invade or threatening to take action. Same thing with Mexico, threatening to take action, threatening to do Colombia and Cuba too, right? So just more and more and more shit's happening. And then you take it back a couple months, you have Charlie Kirk and all that. Take it back a couple months further. See, and that's really like the extent of my memory right now, you know, but there's 200 plus things just in the first year of Trump's term. And that's what that video is about. 200 plus illegal acts, right? So it's hard to stay on top of it. And that's why we need to be very, like strong bodies, a strong mind. So I did yoga today. Right? And I always thought it was, I mean, stretching is good, you know what I mean? But like yoga is nothing special, but yoga is something special. It's pretty cool, man. It really showed me some weaknesses, you know? But regardless, you know, strong body's a strong mind. If you're physically active, you're much more likely to be sharp mentally, right? And it's important not to just be like doom scrolling all the time. Like I mentioned last night, spend some time in nature, take some time away from the phone, ground yourself, and then you'll be much more able to participate, you know, able to be in the zone, I guess you could say, and realize that, yeah, the Trump administration has committed over 200 illegal acts in a year. And on top of that, we just invaded a independent country, and a woman, a U.S. citizen, was just shot on U.S. soil by a federal agent who the administration says, I'm not laughing because of that, but I'm laughing because the administration said absolute immunity for the federal agent, right? Because he might have PTSD from a former incident being drugged by a car, right? Regardless, we've been over that many times. The point is it's a lot of shit, and it's hard for the normal person to keep up, you know? And that I feel like that's kind of how they're getting away with these Epstein files, because they can just keep throwing more shit on top and shoving it under the rug. But I know we're better than that. We're smarter than that. Let's stay on top of it.
Mr. Burns' defense. Your average American might get some of these headlines, but I guarantee that the median American voter is not privy to half of this stuff. And the information economy is in shambles. Trump has spent the last 8 years preemptively accusing everyone else of corruption so that when he does the very thing that he projected onto others, it lands softly. Oh, this is just politics as usual, or, well, both sides are bad, so what? But this is not politics as usual. This is the playbook of authoritarianism. And perhaps the most galling part is how little pushback there's been, even among people who are paying attention. You might remember 2015. Remember the right-wing conspiracy theory that President Obama was going to evade red states, Jade Helm 15? Well, that fever dream has essentially come true, except it wasn't Obama, it's actively Trump, and it's going on right now. And all those Second Amendment tyranny resistors are suddenly mysteriously silent. Even worse, Trump and his surrogates now whine that simply calling their behavior authoritarianism itself is an incitement to violence, thus justifying further crackdowns. This is the logic of a wife beater. This is gaslighting on a national scale. And early in Trump's second term,
it's getting real close to where it's illegal to protest. And protesting is American. You know, we should be allowed to boycott. We should be allowed to protest. And, you know, we spoke a little bit about Israel earlier. And you're not allowed to boycott Israel in like 45 states, you know, that's kind of crazy. You should be allowed to boycott whatever you want as an American, you know, and to protest whatever you want. You don't like the original administration, that's okay. You know, you're allowed to protest. But in this, you're getting shot for it, you know, that seems to be or pepper sprayed, or, you know, it seems to be getting really bad.
We were asking, is this a constitutional crisis? Well, yeah, it was. But the constitutional crisis is over. We lost. Trial courts have fought valiantly, but the Supreme Court has repeatedly abdicated its role and handed over unprecedented power to the president. Not any president, certainly not a Democratic president, but to one president, Donald Trump. The Supreme Court will not save us. And for reasons that I cannot fathom, they seem to welcome the turn towards authoritarianism. Now, I recognize that it hasn't been seamless. There has been plenty of buffoonery. Trump exists in such a dense bubble of misinformation that I think he truly believes everyone else is as corrupt as he is. And that delusion has led him to empower some of the most incompetent loyalists alive, Lindsey Halligan, Alina Habba, and Emil Bove, who have bungled his revenge fantasies. And some of their ham-fisted schemes have exploded in their faces, and certain institutions, especially lower courts and juries, have pushed back. But the terrifying part is this. Their corrupt plans might have worked if they weren't so dumb, and eventually a more competent authoritarian will step in and finish what they started. As Professor Nicholas Grossman put it, in normal democracy terms, we're in bad shape and things are getting worse. In consolidated authoritarianism terms, we're doing pretty well as the regime is haphazard, meeting resistance and growing increasingly unpopular. And I think he's absolutely right, but I'm not confident that that will still be true 3 years from now. And look,
well, yeah, because the plan is to get Vance in here, right? So yeah, that's why Peter Thiel and the Open AI shit's important, Sam Altman and all that, because they groomed J.D. Vance to be the next president. He's a first-term senator who all of a sudden is Trump's VP because Elon Musk and Peter Thiel said so. You know, and they're the ones, remember we went over it last night, big oil and big tech giving like $250 million, you know. So Trump does what they tell him to, you know, whatever daddy tells you, you know, that's what's happening. So J.D. Vance is VP right now. And we're looking at Vance next election cycle, and that's going to be really bad because then that's whenever the AI is really going to kick in. It's already advancing at a way too fast pace, and yeah, I mean, that's my prediction. You know, hopefully, it doesn't happen, and it's because thankfully the administration has become increasingly unpopular. So we'll see. Maybe a rigged election. I don't know, but also you got to think it's going to come down to it because we're looking at AOC or Gavin Newsom for president on the Democratic side of things, and that's not good at all, you know, because then Vance has a serious shot of winning because I don't know too much about Gavin Newsom and AOC, but I know the majority of people don't think they're fit for president, you know. Who I would like to see, Rand Paul or Thomas Massie. Preferably Thomas Massie. I think he's the best option. I don't think it's going to happen, though. I think we're probably going to be fucked next election cycle. But we'll see what happens. It's in the future. Anything can happen. Oh, shit. Where were we?
He does the very thing that he projected onto others.
Yeah.
Early in Trump's second term, we were who have bungled his revenge fantasies. And haphazard, meeting resistance and growing salvation yet. We do still have a choice. But 3 years from now, a whole lot of these bastards are going to need to go to jail. There will be enormous political pressure to just move on and pretend like this never happened, arguably like President Biden did after 2021. But authoritarianism is like cancer. Ignore it and it spreads. Pretend it's gone and it comes back worse. And President Trump is a malignant tumor on this nation. Look, we no longer have a Republican Party and a Democratic Party. We have a democracy party and an authoritarian party. And unfortunately, electorally, there's not a lot we can do right now. But we still do have a choice. So keep pushing back. Keep protesting, keep recording, and keep talking. Yes, maybe it's time to bring politics back to the dinner table. A lot of people simply don't know the scope of what's happening because it's bad. But I believe there is still time. But just.
Do you want to take a second and touch on something that...
So, yeah, just one thing I do want to say is, you know, Trump has probably taken it further than anyone's taken it. But Biden's also been was pretty authoritarian. And the problem is these, like, massive executive orders, like, you know, especially these last few terms, it's you get in and you undo everything the last president did. You know, Biden did that when he got in after Trump's first term, and Trump did it after he got in after Biden's first term. So you get in and undo everything the previous president did, which is not okay. I mean, I understand maybe some things got to go. I don't know. It's a slippery slope. So, yeah, keep that in mind. Authoritarianism, it's already kind of here. So, yeah. Anyways, guys, that's it for this one. All right, y'all. I'm going to end the stream for tonight. We got plenty more for tomorrow. Thank you all for watching. God bless you. We'll see you in the next one. Love y'all.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. What is his name? What shall I tell them? I am who I am. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, and the truth, and the life. I am the true vine. I am the founder of one. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Before Abraham was born, I am.
Let this be a lesson to all you ants. Ideas are very dangerous things. You are mindless, soil-shoving losers, put on this earth to serve us.
You're wrong, Hopper. Ants are not meant to serve grasshoppers. I've seen these ants do great things. And year after year, they somehow manage to pick food for themselves and you. So who is the weaker species? Ants don't serve grasshoppers. It's you who need us. We're a lot stronger than you say we are. And you know it, don't you?
And remember, kids, the next time that somebody tells you the government wouldn't do that, oh yes they would.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operation.